The Secret Teachings of All Ages. An encyclopedic outline of Masonic, Hermetic, Kabbalistic, and Rosicrucian symbolical philosophy, being an interpretation of the secret teachings concealed within the rituals, allegories, and mysteries of all ages. By Mänli P. Hall. Narrated by Matthew Schmitz. This book is dedicated to the rational soul of the world. An analysis of tarot cards. Opinions of authorities differ widely concerning the origin of playing cards, the purpose for which they were intended, and the time of their introduction into Europe. In his researches into the history of playing cards, Samuel Weller Singer advances the opinion that cards reached southern Europe from India by way of Arabia. It is probable that the tarot cards were part of the magical and philosophical lore secured by the Knights Templar from the Saracens, or one of the mystical sects then flourishing in Syria. Returning to Europe, the Templars, to avoid persecution, concealed the arcane meaning of the symbols by introducing the leaves of their magical book, ostensibly as a device for amusement and gambling. In support of this contention, Mrs. John King van Rensselaer states that cards were brought by the home-returning warriors, who imported many of the newly acquired customs and habits of the Orient to their own countries, seems to be a well-established fact, and it does not contradict the statement made by some writers who declared that the gypsies, who about that time began to wander over Europe, brought with them and introduced cards which they used, as they do at the present day, for divining the future. See the Devil's Picture books. Through the gypsies, the tarot cards may be tracked back to the religious symbolism of the ancient Egyptians. In his remarkable work, The Gypsies, Samuel Roberts presents ample proof of their Egyptian origin. In one place he writes, "When gypsies originally arrived in England is very uncertain. They are first noticed in our laws by several statutes against them in the reign of Henry VIII, in which they are described as an outlandish people, calling themselves Egyptians, who do not profess any craft or trade, but go about in great numbers." A curious legend relates that after the destruction of the Serapeum in Alexandria, the large body of attendant priests banded themselves together to preserve the secrets of the rites of Serapis. Their descendants, gypsies, carrying with them the most precious of the volumes saved from the burning library, the Book of Enoch, or Thoth, the Tarot, became wanderers upon the face of the earth, remaining a people apart with an ancient language and a birthright of magic and mystery. Court de Gebelin believed the word tarot itself to be derived from two Egyptian words, tar meaning road and ro meaning royal. Thus the tarot constitutes the royal road to wisdom. See Le Monde Primitif. In his History of Magic, P. Christian, the mouthpiece of a certain French secret society, presents a fantastic account of a purported initiation into the Egyptian mysteries, wherein the 22 major tarots assume the proportions of trestle boards of immense size and line a great gallery. Stopping before each card in turn, the initiator described its symbolism to the candidate. Edward Shure, whose source of information was similar to that of Christians, hints at the same ceremony in his chapter on initiation into the Hermetic mysteries. See The Great Initiates. While the Egyptians may well have employed the tarot cards in their rituals, these French mystics present no evidence other than their own assertions to support this theory. The validity also of the so-called Egyptian tarots, now in circulation, has never been satisfactorily established. The drawings are not only quite modern, but the symbolism itself savors of French rather than Egyptian influence. The tarot is undoubtedly a vital element in Rosicrucian symbolism, possibly the very book of universal knowledge which the members of the order claimed to possess. The Rota Mundi is a term frequently occurring in the early manifestos of the Fraternity of the Rose Cross. The word Rota, by a rearrangement of its letters, becomes tarot, the ancient name of these mysterious cards. W.F.C. Wigston has discovered evidence that Sir Francis Bacon employed the tarot symbolism in his ciphers. The numbers 21, 56, and 78, which are all directly related to the divisions of the tarot deck, are frequently involved in Bacon's cryptograms. In the great Shakespearean folio of 1623, the Christian name of Lord Bacon appears 21 times on page 56 of the Histories. See the Columbus of literature. Many symbols appearing upon the tarot cards have definite Masonic interest. The Pythagorean numerologist will also find an important relationship to exist between the numbers on the cards and the designs accompanying the numbers. The Kabbalist will be immediately impressed by the significant sequence of the cards, and the alchemist will discover certain emblems meaningless save to one versed in the divine chemistry of transmutation and regeneration. As the Greeks placed the letters of their alphabet, with their corresponding numbers, upon the various parts of the body of their humanly represented logos, so the tarot cards have an analogy not only in the parts and members of the universe, but also in the divisions of the human body. They are in fact the key to the magical constitution of man. The tarot cards must be considered, 1. As separate and complete hieroglyphs, each representing a distinct principle, law, power, or element in nature. 2. In relation to each other as the effect of one agent operating upon another. And 3. As vowels and consonants of a philosophic alphabet. The laws governing all phenomena are represented by the symbols upon the tarot cards, whose numerical values are equal to the numerical equivalents of the phenomena. As every structure consists of certain elemental parts, so the tarot cards represent the components of the structure of philosophy. Irrespective of the science or philosophy with which the student is working, the tarot cards can be identified with the essential constituents of his subject, each card thus being related to a specific part according to mathematical and philosophical laws. An imprisoned person, writes Eliphas Levi, with no other book than the tarot, if he knew how to use it, could in a few years acquire universal knowledge, and would be able to speak on all subjects with unequaled learning and inexhaustible eloquence. See Transcendental Magic. The diverse opinions of eminent authorities on the tarot symbolism are quite irreconcilable. The conclusions of the scholarly Court de Gebelen and the bizarre Grand Itala, the first authorities on the subject, not only are at radical variance, but are both equally discredited by Levi, whose arrangement of the tarot trumps was rejected in turn by Arthur Edward Waite and Paul Case as being an effort to mislead students. The followers of Levi, especially Pappas, Christian, Westcott, and Schure, are regarded by the Reformed Tarotists as honest but benighted individuals who wandered the darkness for lack of Pamela Coleman Smith's new deck of tarot cards with revisions by Mr. Waite. Most writers on the tarot, Mr. Waite a notable exception, have proceeded upon the hypothesis that the 22 major trumps represent the letters of the Hebrew alphabet. This supposition is based upon nothing more substantial than the coincidence that both consist of 22 parts. That Postel, St. Martin, and Levi all wrote books divided into sections corresponding to the major tarots is an interesting sidelight on the subject. The major trump cards portray incidents from the Book of Revelation, and the Apocalypse of St. John is also divided into 22 chapters. Assuming the Kabbalah to hold the solution to the tarot riddle, seekers have often ignored other possible lines of research. The task, however, of discovering the proper relationship sustained by the tarot trumps to the letters of the Hebrew alphabet and the paths of wisdom, thus far has not met with any great measure of success. The major trumps of the tarot and the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet cannot be synchronized without first fixing the correct place of the unnumbered or zero card, Lemat, the Fool. Levi places this card between the 20th and 21st tarots, assigning to it the Hebrew letter Shin. The same order is followed by Pappas, Christian, and Waite, the last, however, declaring this arrangement to be incorrect. Westcott makes the zero card the 22nd of the tarot major trumps. On the other hand, both Court de Gebelen and Paul Case place the unnumbered card before the first numbered card of the major trumps, for if the natural order of the numbers, according to either the Pythagorean or Kabbalistic system, be adhered to, the zero card must naturally precede the number 1. This does not dispose of the problem, however, for efforts to assign a Hebrew letter to each tarot trump in sequence produce an effect far from convincing. Mr. Waite, who re-edited the tarot, expresses himself thus: I am not to be included among those who are satisfied that there is a valid correspondence between Hebrew letters and tarot trump symbols. See Introduction to The Book of Formation by Knut Stenring. The real explanation may be that the major tarots no longer are in the same sequence as when they formed the Leaves of Hermes sacred book, for the Egyptians, or even their Arabian successors, could have purposely confused the cards so that their secrets might be better preserved. Mr. Case has developed a system which, while superior to most, depends largely upon two debatable points, namely the accuracy of Mr. Waite's revised tarot and the justification for assigning the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet to the unnumbered or 0 card. Since Aleph, the first Hebrew letter, has the numerical value of 1, its assignment to the 0 card is equivalent to the statement that 0 is equal to the letter Aleph and therefore synonymous with the number 1. Early Portuguese cards, from Chateau's Origin and History of Playing Cards. In writing of the deck from which the 4 cavaliers, or jacks, here reproduced were taken, William Andrew Chateau notes some of the specimens of Portuguese cards given in the Jeu de cartes, Tarots et de cartes numerales have very much the appearance of having been originally suggested by, if not copied from, an Oriental type, more especially in the suits of denari and bastani, money and clubs. In those cards, the circular figure, generally understood as representing denari, or money, is certainly much more like the chakra or quoit of Vishnu, as seen in Hindustanic drawings, than a piece of coin, while on the top of the club is a diamond proper, which is another of the attributes of the same deity. Also worthy of note are the Rosicrucian and Masonic emblems appearing on various medieval decks, as the secrets of these organizations were often concealed in cryptic engravings. It is very probable that the enigmatic diagrams upon various decks of cards were used both to conceal and to perpetuate the political and philosophical arcana of these orders. The frontispiece of Mr. Chateau's books shows a knave of hearts bearing a shield emblazoned with a crowned Rosicrucian rose. With rare insight, Court de Gebelin assigned the 0 card to Ein Sof, the unknowable first cause. As the central panel of the Bembine table represents the creative power, surrounded by 7 triads of manifesting divinities, so may the 0 card represent that eternal power of which the 21 surrounding or manifesting aspects are but limited expressions. If the 21 major trumps be considered as limited forms existing in the abstract substance of the 0 card, it then becomes their common denominator. Which letter, then, of the Hebrew alphabet is the origin of all the remaining letters? The answer is apparent: Yod. In the presence of so many speculations, one more may not offend. The 0 card, Lemat, the Fool, has been likened to the material universe because the mortal sphere is the world of unreality. The lower universe, like the mortal body of man, is but a garment, a motley costume, well likened to cap and bells. Beneath the garments of the Fool is the divine substance, however, of which the jester is but a shadow. This world is a Mardi Gras, a pageantry of divine sparks masked in the garb of fools. Was not this 0 card, the Fool, placed in the tarot deck to deceive all who could not pierce the veil of illusion? The tarot cards were entrusted by the illumined hierophants of the mysteries into the keeping of the foolish and the ignorant, thus becoming playthings, in many instances even instruments of vice. Man's evil habits therefore actually became the unconscious perpetuators of his philosophical precepts. We must admire the wisdom of the initiates, writes Papus, who utilized vice and made it produce more beneficial results than virtue. Does not this act of the ancient priests itself afford proof that the entire mystery of the tarot is wrapped up in the symbolism of its 0 card? If knowledge was thus entrusted to fools, should it not be sought for in this card? If Lemat be placed before the first card of the tarot deck, and the others laid out in a horizontal line in sequence from left to right, it will be found that the Fool is walking toward the other trumps, as though about to pass through various cards. Like the spiritually hoodwinked and bound neophyte, Lemat is about to enter upon the supreme adventure, that of passage through the gates of the divine wisdom. If the 0 card be considered as extraneous to the major trumps, this destroys the numerical analogy between these cards and the Hebrew letters by leaving one letter without a tarot correspondent. In this event, it will be necessary to assign the missing letter to a hypothetical tarot card called the Elements, assumed to have been broken up to form the 56 cards of the minor trumps. It is possible that each of the major trumps may be subject to a similar division. The first numbered major trump is called Le Batailleur, the juggler, and according to Court de Gabellin, indicates the entire fabric of creation to be but a dream, existence a juggling of divine elements, and life a perpetual game of hazard. The seeming miracles of nature are but feats of cosmic legerdemain. Man is like the little ball in the hands of the juggler who waves his wand and, presto, the ball vanishes. The world looking on does not realize that the vanished article is still cleverly concealed by the juggler in the hollow of his hand. This is also the adept whom Omar Khayyam calls the master of the show. His message is that the wise direct the phenomena of nature and are never deceived thereby. The magician stands behind a table on which are spread out a number of objects, prominent among them a cup, the Holy Grail and the cup placed by Joseph in Benjamin's sack, a coin, the tribute money and the wages of a master builder, and a sword, that of Goliath, and also the mystic blade of the philosopher which divides the false from the true. The magician's hat is in the form of the cosmic lemniscate, signifying the first motion of creation. His right hand points to the earth, his left holds aloft the rod of Jacob, and also the staff that budded, the human spine crowned with the globe of creative intelligence. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the magician wears an uraeus, or golden band around his forehead. The table before him is in the form of a perfect cube, and his girdle is the serpent of eternity devouring its own tail. The second numbered major trump is called La Papesse, the female pope, and has been associated with a curious legend of the only woman who ever sat in the pontifical chair. Pope Joan is supposed to have accomplished this by masquerading in malt attire and was stoned to death when her subterfuge was discovered. This card portrays a seated woman crowned with a tiara surmounted by a lunar crescent. In her lap is the Torah, or Book of the Law, usually partly closed, and in her left hand are the keys to the secret doctrine, one gold and the other silver. Behind her rise two pillars, Jachin and Boaz, with a multicolored veil stretched between. Her throne stands upon a checkerboard floor. A figure called Juno is occasionally substituted for La Papesse. Like the female hierophant of the mysteries of Sybil, this symbolic figure personifies the Shekinah, or divine wisdom. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the priestess is veiled, a reminder that the full countenance of truth is not revealed to uninitiated man. A veil also covers one half of her book, thus intimating that but one half of the mystery of being can be comprehended. The third numbered major trump is called L'Impératrice, the Empress, and has been likened to the woman clothed with the sun, described in the Apocalypse. On this card appears the winged figure of a woman seated upon a throne, supporting with her right hand a shield emblazoned with a phoenix, and holding in her left a scepter surmounted by an orb or trifoliate flower. Beneath her left foot is sometimes shown the crescent. Either the Empress is crowned or her head is surrounded by a diadem of stars, sometimes both. She is called Generation and represents the threefold spiritual world out of which proceeds the fourfold material world. To the graduate of the College of the Mysteries, she is the alma mater, out of whose body the initiate has born again. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the Empress is shown seated upon a cube filled with eyes, and a bird is balanced upon the forefinger of the left hand. The upper part of her body is surrounded by a radiant golden nimbus. Being emblematic of the power from which emanates the entire tangible universe, L'Impératrice is frequently symbolized as pregnant. The fourth numbered major trump is called L'Empereur, the Emperor, and by its numerical value is directly associated with the great deity revered by the Pythagoreans under the form of the tetrad. His symbols declare the Emperor to be the Demiurgus, the great king of the inferior world. The Emperor is dressed in armor, and his throne is a cube stone upon which a phoenix is also clearly visible. The king has his legs crossed in a most significant manner and carries either a scepter surmounted by an orb or a scepter in his right hand and an orb in his left. The orb itself is evidence that he is supreme ruler of the world. Upon his right and left breasts, respectively, appear the symbols of the sun and moon, which in symbolism are referred to as the eyes of the great king. The position of the body and legs form the symbol of sulfur, the sign of the ancient alchemical monarch. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the figure is in profile. He wears a Masonic apron, and the skirt forms a right-angled triangle. Upon his head is the crown of the north, and his forehead is adorned with the coiled uraeus. The fifth numbered major trump is called Le Pape, the Pope, and represents the high priest of a pagan or Christian mystery school. In this card, the Hierophant wears the tiara and carries in his left hand the triple cross surmounting the globe of the world. His right hand, bearing upon its back the stigmata, makes the ecclesiastic sign of esotericism, and before him kneel two suppliants or acolytes. The back of the papal throne is in the form of a celestial and terrestrial column. This card signifies the initiate or master of the mystery of life, and according to the Pythagoreans, the spiritual physician. The illusionary universe, in the form of the two figures, polarity, kneels before the throne upon which sits the initiate, who has elevated his consciousness to the plane of spiritual understanding and reality. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the master wears the uraeus, a white and black figure. Life and death, light and darkness, good and evil, kneel before him. The initiate's mastery over unreality is indicated by the tiara and the triple cross emblems of rulership over the three worlds which have issued from the unknowable first cause. The sixth numbered major trump is called Les Amoureux, the lovers. There are two distinct forms of this tarot. One shows a marriage ceremony in which a priest is uniting a youth and a maiden, Adam and Eve, in holy wedlock. Sometimes a winged figure above transfixes the lovers with his dart. The second form of the card portrays a youth with a female figure on either side. One of these figures wears a golden crown and is winged, while the other is attired in the flowing robes of the bacchante, and on her head is a wreath of vine leaves. The maidens represent the twofold soul of man, spiritual and animal, the first his guardian angel and the second his ever-present demon. The youth stands at the beginning of mature life, the parting of the ways, where he must choose between virtue and vice, the eternal and the temporal. Above, in a halo of light, is the genius of fate, his star, mistaken for Cupid by the uninformed. If youth chooses unwisely, the arrow of blindfolded fate will transfix him. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the arrow of the genius points directly to the figure of vice, thereby signifying that the end of her path is destruction. This card reminds man that the price of free will, or more correctly, the power of choice, is responsibility. The seventh numbered major trump is called Les Chariots, the chariot, and portrays a victorious warrior crowned and riding in a chariot drawn by black and white sphinxes or horses. The starry canopy of the chariot is upheld by 4 columns. This card signifies the exalted one who rides in the chariot of creation. The vehicle of the solar energy, being numbered 7, reveals the arcane truth that the 7 planars are the chariots of the solar power which rides victorious in their midst. The 4 columns supporting the canopy represent the 4 mighty ones who uphold the worlds, represented by the star-strewn drapery. The figure carries the scepter of the solar energy, and its shoulders are ornamented with lunar crescents, the Urim and Thummim. The sphinxes drawing the chariot represent the secret and unknown power by which the victorious ruler is moved continuously through the various parts of his universe. In certain tarot decks, the victor signifies the regenerated man, for the body of the chariot is a cubic stone. The man in armor is not standing in the chariot, but is rising out of the cube, thus typifying the ascension of the 3 out of the 4, the turning upward of the flap of the master mason's apron. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the warrior carries the curved sword of Luna, is bearded to signify maturity, and wears the collar of the planetary orbits. His scepter, emblematic of the threefold universe, is crowned with a square upon which is a circle surmounted by a triangle. The 8th numbered major trump is called La Justice, justice, and portrays a seated figure upon a throne, the back of which rises in the form of 2 columns. Justice is crowned and carries in her right hand a sword, and in her left a pair of scales. This card is a reminder of the judgment of the soul in the Hall of Osiris. It teaches that only balanced forces can endure, and that eternal justice destroys with the sword that which is unbalanced. Sometimes justice is depicted with a braid of her own hair twisted around her neck, in a manner resembling a hangman's knot. This may subtly imply that man is the cause of his own undoing, his actions, symbolized by his hair, being the instrument of his annihilation. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the figure of justice is raised upon a dais of 3 steps, for justice can be fully administered only by such as have been elevated to the 3rd degree. Justice is blindfolded, that the visible shall in no way influence its decision. For reasons he considers beyond his reader's intelligence, Mr. Waite reversed the 8th and 11th major trumps. The 9th numbered major trump is called Le Hermite, the Hermit, and portrays an aged man robed in a monkish habit and cowl, leaning on a staff. This card was popularly supposed to represent Diogenes in his quest for an honest man. In his right hand, the recluse carries a lamp which he partly conceals within the folds of his cape. The hermit thereby personifies the secret organizations which for uncounted centuries have carefully concealed the light of the ancient wisdom from the profane. The staff of the hermit is knowledge, which is man's main and only enduring support. Sometimes the mystic rod is divided by knobs into 7 sections, a subtle reference to the mystery of the 7 sacred centers along the human spine. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the hermit shields the lamp behind a rectangular cape to emphasize the philosophic truth that wisdom, if exposed to the fury of ignorance, would be destroyed like the tiny flame of a lamp unprotected from the storm. Man's bodies form a cloak through which his divine nature is faintly visible, like the flame of the partly covered lantern. Through renunciation, the hermetic life, man attains depth of character and tranquility of spirit. The 10th numbered major trump is called La Roue de Fortune, the Wheel of Fortune, and portrays a mysterious wheel with 8 spokes, the familiar Buddhist symbol of the cycle of necessity. To its rim climb Anubis and Typhon, the principles of good and evil. Above sits the immobile Sphinx, carrying the sword of justice and signifying the perfect equilibrium of universal wisdom. Anubis is shown rising and Typhon descending, but when Typhon reaches the bottom, evil ascends again, and when Anubis reaches the top, good wanes once more. The Wheel of Fortune represents the lower universe as a whole within divine wisdom, the Sphinx, as the eternal arbiter between good and evil. In India, the chakra, or wheel, is associated with the life centers either of a world or of an individual. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the Sphinx is armed with a javelin, and Typhon is being thrown from the wheel. The vertical columns, supporting the wheel, and so placed that but one is visible, represent the access of the world with the inscrutable Sphinx upon its northern pole. Sometimes the wheel, with its supports, is in a boat upon the water. The water is the ocean of illusion, which is the sole foundation of the cycle of necessity. The 11th numbered major trump is called La Force, strength, and portrays a girl wearing a hat in the form of a lemniscate, with her hands upon the mouth of an apparently ferocious lion. Considerable controversy exists as to whether the maid is closing or opening the lion's mouth. Most writers declare her to be closing the jaws of the beast, but a critical inspection conveys the opposite impression. The young woman symbolizes spiritual strength, and the lion either the animal world which the girl is mastering or the secret wisdom over which she is mistress. The lion also signifies the summer solstice and the girl, Virgo, for when the sun enters this constellation, the Virgin robs the lion of his strength. King Solomon's throne was ornamented with lions, and he himself was likened to the king of beasts with the key of wisdom between his teeth. In this sense, the girl may be opening the lion's mouth to find the key contained therein, for courage is a prerequisite for the attainment of knowledge. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the symbolism is the same except that the maiden is represented as a priestess wearing an elaborate crown in the form of a bird surmounted by serpents and an ibis. The 12th numbered major trump is called Le Pendu, the Hanged Man, and portrays a young man hanging by his left leg from a horizontal beam, the latter supported by 2 tree trunks, from each of which 6 branches have been removed. The right leg of the youth is crossed in back of the left, and his arms are folded behind his back in such a way as to form a cross surmounting a downward pointing triangle. The figure thus forms an inverted symbol of sulfur and, according to Levy, signifies the accomplishment of the magnum opus. In some decks, the figure carries under each arm a money bag from which coins are escaping. Popular tradition associates this card with Judas Iscariot, who is said to have gone forth and hanged himself, the money bags representing the payment he received for his crime. Levy likens the Hanged Man to Prometheus, the eternal sufferer, further declaring that the upturned feet signify the spiritualization of the lower nature. It is also possible that the inverted figure denotes the loss of the spiritual faculties, for the head is below the level of the body. The stumps of the 12 branches are the signs of the zodiac divided into 2 groups, positive and negative, The picture, therefore, depicts polarity temporarily triumphant over the spiritual principle of equilibrium. To attain the heights of philosophy, therefore, man must reverse or invert the order of his life. He then loses his sense of personal possession because he renounces the rule of gold in favor of the golden rule. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the hanging man is suspended between two palm trees and signifies the sun god who dies perennial for his world. The 13th numbered major trump is called La Mort, death, and portrays a reaping skeleton with a great scythe cutting off the heads, hands, and feet rising out of the earth about it. In the course of its labors, the skeleton has apparently cut off one of its own feet. Not all decks show this peculiarity, but this point well emphasizes the philosophic truth that unbalance and destructiveness are synonymous. The skeleton is the proper emblem of the first and supreme deity because it is the foundation of the body, as the absolute is the foundation of creation. The reaping skeleton physically signifies death, but philosophically, that irresistible impulse in nature which causes every being to be ultimately absorbed into the divine condition in which it existed before the illusionary universe had been manifested. The blade of the scythe is the moon with its crystallizing power. The field in which death reaps is the universe, and the card discloses that all things growing out of the earth shall be cut down and return to earth again. Kings, queens, courtesans, and knaves are alike to death, the master of the visible and parent parts of all creatures. In some tarot decks, death is symbolized as a figure in armor mounted on a white horse which tramples underfoot old and young alike. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, a rainbow is seen behind the figure of death, thus signifying that the mortality of the body of itself achieves the immortality of the spirit. Death, though it destroys form, can never destroy life, which continually renews itself. This card is the symbol of the constant renovation of the universe, disintegration, that reintegration may follow upon a higher level of expression. The 14th numbered major trump is called La Temperance, temperance, and portrays an angelic figure with the sun upon her forehead. She carries two urns, one empty and the other full, and continually pours the contents of the upper into the lower. In some tarot decks, the flowing water takes the form of the symbol of Aquarius. Not one drop, however, of the living water is lost in this endless transference between the superior vessel and the inferior. When the lower urn is filled, the vases are reversed, thus signifying that life pours first from the invisible into the visible, then from the visible back into the invisible. The spirit controlling this flow is an emissary of the great Jehovah, demiurgus of the world. The sun, or light cluster upon the woman's forehead, controls the flow of water, which, being drawn upward into the air by the solar rays, descends upon the earth as rain, to draw up and fall again ad infinitum. Herein is also shown the passage of the human life forces back and forth between positive and negative poles of the creative system. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the symbolism is the same, except that the winged figure is male instead of female. It is surrounded by a solar nimbus and pours water from a golden urn into a silver one, typifying the descent of celestial forces into the sublunary spheres. The 15th numbered major trump is called Le Diable, the devil, and portrays a creature resembling Pan with horns of a ram or deer, the arms and body of a man, and the legs and feet of a goat or dragon. The figure stands upon a cubic stone, to a ring in front of which are chained two satyrs. From a scepter, this so-called demon carries a lighted torch or candle. The entire figure is symbolic of the magic powers of the astral light, or universal mirror, in which the divine forces are reflected in an inverted or infernal state. The demon is winged like a bat, showing that it pertains to the nocturnal or shadow inferior sphere. The animal natures of man, in the form of a male and female elemental, are chained to its footstool. The torch is the false light which guides unillumined souls to their own undoing. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot appears Typhon, a winged creature composed of a hog, a man, a bat, a crocodile, and a hippopotamus, standing in the midst of its own destructiveness and holding aloft the firebrand of the incendiary. Typhon is created by man's own misdeeds, which, turning upon their maker, destroy him. The 16th numbered major trump is called Le Feu du Ciel, the fire of heaven, and portrays a tower, the battlements of which, in the form of a crown, are being destroyed by a bolt of lightning issuing from the sun. The crown, being considerably smaller than the tower which it surmounts, possibly indicates that its destruction resulted from its insufficiency. The lightning bolt sometimes takes the form of the zodiacal sign of Scorpio, and the tower may be considered a phallic emblem. Two figures are falling from the tower, one in front and the other behind. This tarot card is popularly associated with the traditional fall of man. The divine nature of humanity is depicted as a tower. When his crown is destroyed, man falls into the lower world and takes upon himself the illusion of materiality. Here also is a key to the mystery of sex. The tower is supposedly filled with gold coins, which, showering out in great numbers from the rent made by the lightning bolt, suggest potential powers. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the tower is a pyramid, its apex shattered by a lightning bolt. Here is a reference to the missing capstone of the universal house. In support of Levy's contention that this card is connected with the Hebrew letter Ayin, the falling figure in the foreground is similar in general appearance to the 16th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. The 17th numbered major trump is called Les Étoiles, the stars, and portrays a young girl kneeling with one foot in water and the other on land, her body somewhat suggesting the swastika. She has two urns, the contents of which she pours upon the land and sea. Above the girl's head are 8 stars, one of which is exceptionally large and bright. Count de Gebelin considers the great star to be Sothis, or Sirius. The other 7 are the sacred planets of the ancients. He believes the female figure to be Isis in the act of causing the inundations of the Nile, which accompanied the rising of the dog star. The unclothed figure of Isis may well signify that nature does not receive her garment of verdure until the rising of the Nile waters releases the germinal life of plants and flowers. The bush and bird, or butterfly, signify the growth and resurrection which accompany the rising of the waters. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the great star contains a diamond, composed of a black and white triangle, and the flowering bush is a tall plant with a trifoliate head upon which a butterfly alights. Here Isis is in the form of an upright triangle, and the vases have become shallow cups. The elements of water and earth under her feet represent the opposites of nature, sharing impartially in the divine abundance. A card from the Mantegna pack, from Taylor's The History of Playing Cards. Among the more curious examples of playing cards are those of the Mantegna deck. In 1820, a perfect deck of 50 cards brought the then amazing price of £80. The 50 subjects composing the Mantegna deck, each of which is represented by an appropriate figure, are 1. A beggar, 2. A page, 3. A goldsmith, 4. A merchant, 5. A gentleman, 6. A knight, 7. The doge, 8. A king, 9. An emperor, 10. The pope, 11. Calliope, 12. Urania, 13. Terpsichore, 14. Erato, 15. Polyhymnia, 16. Thalia, 17. Melpomene, 18. Euterpe, 19. Clio, 20. Apollo, 21. Grammar, 22. Logic, 23. Rhetoric, 24. Geometry, 25. Arithmetic, 26. Music, 27. Poetry, 28. Philosophy, 29. Astrology, 30. Theology, 31. Astronomy, 32. Chronology, 33. Cosmogony, 34. Temperance, 35. Prudence, 36. Fortitude, 37. Justice, 38. Charity, 39. Fortitude, 40. Faith, 41. The Moon, 42. Mercury, 43. Venus, 45. The Sun, 45. Mars, 46. Jupiter, 47. Saturn, 48. The eighth sphere, 49. The primum mobile, 50. The first cause. The Kabbalistic significance of these cards is apparent, and it is possible that they have a direct analogy to the 50 gates of light referred to in Kabbalistic writings. The 18th numbered major trump is called La Lune, the moon, and portrays Luna rising between 2 towers, one light and the other dark. A dog and a wolf are baying at the rising moon, and in the foreground is a pool of water from which emerges a crawfish. Between the towers a path winds, vanishing in the extreme background. Court de Gebelin sees in this card another reference to the rising of the Nile and states on the authority of Pausanias that the Egyptians believed the inundations of the Nile to result from the tears of the moon goddess, which, falling into the river, swelled its flow. These tears are seen dropping from the lunar face. Court de Gabelin also relates the towers to the pillars of Hercules, beyond which, according to the Egyptians, the luminaries never passed. He notes also that the Egyptians represented the tropics as dogs who, as faithful doorkeepers, prevented the sun and moon from penetrating too near the poles. The crab or crawfish signifies the retrograde motion of the moon. This card also refers to the path of wisdom. Man, in his quest of reality, emerges from the pool of illusion. After mastering the guardians of the gates of wisdom, he passes between the fortresses of science and theology and follows the winding path leading to spiritual liberation. His way is faintly lighted by human reason, the moon, which is but a reflection of divine wisdom. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the towers are pyramids, the dogs are black and white respectively, and the moon is partly obscured by clouds. The entire scene suggests the dreary and desolate place in which the mystery dramas of the lesser rites were enacted. The 19th numbered major trump is called Le Soleil, the sun, and portrays two children, probably Gemini, the twins, standing together in a garden surrounded by a magic ring of flowers. One of these children should be shown as male and the other female. Behind them is a brick wall apparently enclosing the garden. Above the wall, the sun is rising, its rays alternately straight and curved. 13 teardrops are falling from the solar face. Levy, seeing in the two children faith and reason, which must coexist as long as the temporal universe endures, writes, "Human equilibrium requires 2 feet. The worlds gravitate by means of 2 forces. Generation needs 2 sexes." Such is the meaning of the Arcanum of Solomon, represented by the 2 pillars of the temple, Yakin and Boaz. See Transcendental Magic. The Sun of Truth is shining into the garden of the world, over which these 2 children, as personifications of eternal powers, reside. The harmony of the world depends upon the coordination of 2 qualities, symbolized throughout the ages as the mind and the heart. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the children give place to a youth and a maiden. Above them in a solar nimbus is the phallic emblem of generation, a line piercing a circle. Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and the 2 children personify the serpents entwined around the caduceus. The 20th numbered major trump is called Le Jugement, the Judgment, and portrays 3 figures rising apparently from their tombs, though but one coffin is visible. Above them in a blaze of glory is a winged figure, presumably the angel Gabriel, blowing a trumpet. This tarot represents the liberation of man's threefold spiritual nature from the sepulchre of his material constitution. Since but 1/3 of the spirit actually enters the physical body, the other 2/3 constituting the hermetic anthropos or overman, only one of the 3 figures is actually rising from the tomb. Court de Gabelin believes that the coffin may have been an afterthought of the card makers and that the scene actually represents creation rather than resurrection. In philosophy, these 2 words are practically synonymous. The blast of the trumpet represents the creative world, by the intoning of which man is liberated from his terrestrial limitations. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, it is evident that the 3 figures signify the parts of a single being, for 3 mummies are shown emerging from one mummy case. The 21st numbered major trump is called Le Monde, the world, and portrays a female figure draped with a scarf which the wind blows into the form of the Hebrew letter Kaf. Her extended hands, each of which holds a wand, and her left leg, which crosses behind the right, cause the figure to assume the form of the alchemical symbol of sulfur. The central figure is surrounded by a wreath in the form of a Vesica Pisces, which Levy likens to the Kabbalistic crown, Kether. The cherubim of Ezekiel's vision occupy the corners of the card. This tarot is called the microcosm and the macrocosm, because in it are summed up every agency contributing to the structure of creation. The figure, in the form of the emblem of sulfur, represents the divine fire in the heart of the great mystery. The wreath is nature, which surrounds the fiery center. The cherubim represent the elements, worlds, forces, and planes issuing out of the divine fiery center of life. The wreath signifies the crown of the initiate, which is given to those who master the 4 guardians and enter into the presence of unveiled truth. In the pseudo-Egyptian tarot, the cherubim surround a wreath composed of 12 trifoliate flowers, the decanates of the zodiac. A human figure kneels below this wreath, playing upon a harp of 3 strings, for the spirit must create harmony in the triple constitution of its inferior nature, before it can gain for itself the solar crown of immortality. The 4 suits of the minor trumps are considered as analogous to the 4 elements, the 4 corners of creation, and the 4 worlds of Kabbalism. The key to the lesser tarots is presumably the tetragrammaton, or the 4-letter name of Jehovah, Yehovah. The 4 suits of the minor trumps represent also the major divisions of society. Cups are the priesthood, swords the military, coins the tradesmen, and rods the farming class. From the standpoint of what Court de Gabellin calls political geography, cups represent the northern countries, swords the Orient, coins the Occident, and rods the southern countries. The 10 pip cards of each suit represent the nations composing each of these grand divisions. The kings are their governments, the queens their religions, the knights their histories and national characteristics, and the pages their arts and sciences. Elaborate treatises have been written concerning the use of the tarot cards in divination, but as this practice is contrary to the primary purpose of the tarot, no profit can result from its discussion. Many interesting examples of early playing cards are found in the museums of Europe, and there are also noteworthy specimens in the cabinets of various private collectors. A few hand-painted decks exist which are extremely artistic. These depict various important personages contemporary with the artists. In some instances, the court cards are portraitures of the reigning monarch and his family. In England, engraved cards became popular, and in the British Museum are also to be seen some extremely quaint stenciled cards. Heraldic devices were employed, and Chatto, in his Origin and History of Playing Cards, reproduces 4 heraldic cards in which the arms of Pope Clement XI adorn the King of Clubs. There have been philosophical decks with emblems chosen from Greek and Roman mythology, also educational decks ornamented with maps or pictorial representations of famous historic places and incidents. Many rare examples of playing cards have been bound into the covers of early books. In Japan, there are card games, the successful playing of which requires familiarity with nearly all the literary masterpieces of that nation. In India, there are circular decks depicting episodes from the Oriental myths. There are also cards which, in one sense of the word, are not cards, for the designs are on wood, ivory, and even metal. There are comic cards caricaturing disliked persons and places, and there are cards commemorating various human achievements. During the American Civil War, a patriotic deck was circulated in which stars, eagles, anchors, and American flags were substituted for the suits, and the court cards were famous generals. Modern playing cards are the minor trumps of the tarot, from each suit of which the page or valet has been eliminated, leaving 13 cards. Even in its abridged form, however, the modern deck is of profound symbolic importance, for its arrangement is apparently in accord with the divisions of the year. The 2 colors, red and black, represent the 2 grand divisions of the year, and that during which it is south of the equator. The 4 suits represent the seasons, the ages of the ancient Greeks, and the yugas of the Hindus. The 12 court cards are the signs of the zodiac arranged in triads of a father, a power, and a mind, according to the upper section of the Bambine table. The 10 pip cards of each suit represent the sephirothic trees existing in each of the 4 worlds, the suits. The 13 cards of each suit are the 13 lunar months in each year, and the 52 cards of the deck are the 52 weeks in the year. Counting the number of pips and reckoning the jacks, queens, and kings as 11, 12, and 13 respectively, the sum for the 52 cards is 364. If the joker be considered as 1 point, the result is 365, or the number of days in the year. Milton Pottinger believed that the United States of America was laid out according to the conventional deck of playing cards, and that the government will ultimately consist of 52 states administered by a 53rd undenominated division, the District of Columbia. The court cards contain a number of important Masonic symbols. 9 are full face and 3 are a profile. Here is the broken wheel of the law, signifying the 9 months of the prenatal epoch and the 3 degrees of spiritual unfoldment necessary to produce the perfect man. The 4 armed kings are the Egyptian Ammonian architects who gouged out the universe with knives. They are also the cardinal signs of the zodiac. The 4 queens, carrying 8-petaled flowers symbolic of the Christ, are the fixed signs of the zodiac. The 4 jacks, 2 of whom bear acacia sprigs, the jack of hearts in his hand, the jack of clubs in his hat, are the 4 common signs of the zodiac. It should be noted also that the court cards of the spade suit will not look upon the pip in the corner of the card, but face away from it as though fearing this emblem of death. The Grand Master of the Order of the Cards is the King of Clubs, who carries the order as emblematic of his dignity. In its symbolism, chess is the most significant of all games. It has been called the royal game, the pastime of kings. Like the tarot cards, the chessmen represent the elements of life and philosophy. The game was played in India and China long before its introduction into Europe. East Indian princes were wont to sit on the balconies of their palaces and play chess with living men standing upon a checkerboard pavement of black and white marble in the courtyard below. It is popularly believed that the Egyptian pharaohs played chess, but an examination of their sculpture and illuminations has led to the conclusion that the Egyptian game was a form of drafts. In China, chessmen are often carved to represent warring dynasties, as the Manchu and the Ming. The chessboard consists of 64 squares, alternately black and white, and symbolizes the floor of the House of the Mysteries. Upon this field of existence, or thought, move a number of strangely carved figures, each according to fixed law. The white king is Ormuzd, the black king, Ahriman, and upon the plains of Cosmos, the great war between light and darkness is fought through all the ages. Of the philosophical constitution of man, the kings represent the spirit, the queens, the mind, the bishops, the emotions, the knights, the vitality, the castles or rooks, the physical body. The pieces upon the king's side are positive, those upon the queen's side negative. The pawns are the sensory impulses and perceptive faculties, the 8 parts of the soul. The white king and his suit symbolize the self and its vehicles, the black king and his retinue, the not-self, the false ego and its legion. The game of chess thus sets forward the eternal struggle of each part of man's compound nature against the shadow of itself. The nature of each of the chessmen is revealed by the way in which it moves. Geometry is the key to their interpretation. For example, the castle, or the body, moves on the square. The bishop, the emotions, moves on the slant. The king, being the spirit, cannot be captured, but loses the battle when so surrounded that it cannot escape. The tabernacle in the wilderness. There is no doubt that much of the material recorded in the first 5 books of the Old Testament is derived from the initiatory rituals of the Egyptian mysteries. The priests of Isis were deeply versed in occult lore, and the Israelites during their captivity in Egypt learned from them many things concerning the significance of divinity and the manner of worshiping it. The authorship of the first 5 books of the Old Testament is generally attributed to Moses, but whether or not he was the actual writer of them is a matter of controversy. There is considerable evidence to substantiate the hypothesis that the Pentateuch was compiled at a much later date from oral traditions. Concerning the authorship of these books, Thomas Inman makes a rather startling statement. It is true that we have books which purport to be the books of Moses. So there are, or have been, books purporting to be written by Homer, Orpheus, Enoch, Mormon, and Junius. Yet the existence of the writings, and the belief that they were written by those whose name they bear, are no real evidences of the men or the geniuses of the works called by their names. It is also true that Moses is spoken of occasionally in the time of the early kings of Jerusalem, but it is clear that these passages are written by a late hand and have been introduced into the places where they are found, with the definite intention of making it appear that the lawgiver was known to David and Solomon. See Ancient Faiths Embodied in Ancient Names. While this noted scholar undoubtedly had much evidence to support his belief, it seems that this statement is somewhat too sweeping in character. It is apparently based on the fact that Thomas Inman doubted the historical existence of Moses. This doubt was based upon the etymological resemblance of the word Moses to an ancient name for the sun. As the result of these deductions, Inman sought to prove that the lawgiver of Israel was merely another form of the omnipresent solar myth. While Inman demonstrated that by transposing 2 of the ancient letters, the word Moses became Shema, an appellation of the celestial globe, he seems to have overlooked the fact that in the ancient mysteries, the initiates were often given names synonymous with the sun, to symbolize the fact that the redemption and regeneration of the solar power had been achieved within their own natures. It is far more probable that the man whom we know as Moses was an accredited representative of the secret schools, laboring, as many other emissaries have labored, to instruct primitive races in the mysteries of their immortal souls. The true name of the grand old man of Israel, who is known to history as Moses, will probably never be ascertained. The word Moses, when understood in its esoteric Egyptian sense, means one who has been admitted into the mystery schools of wisdom, has gone forth to teach the ignorant concerning the will of the gods and the mysteries of life. As these mysteries were explained within the temples of Isis, Osiris, and Serapis. There is much controversy concerning the nationality of Moses. Some assert that he was a Jew, adopted and educated by the ruling house of Egypt. Others hold the opinion that he was a full-blooded Egyptian. A few even believe him to be identical with the immortal Hermes, for both these illustrious founders of religious systems received tablets from heaven supposedly written by the finger of God. The stories told concerning Moses, his discovery in the Ark of Bulrushes by Pharaoh's daughter, his adoption into the royal family of Egypt, and his later revolt against Egyptian autocracy coincide exactly with certain ceremonies through which the candidates of the Egyptian mysteries passed in their ritualistic wanderings in search of truth and understanding. The analogy can also be traced in the movements of the heavenly bodies. It is not strange that the erudite Moses, initiated in Egypt, should teach the Jews a philosophy containing the more important principles of Egyptian esotericism. The religions of Egypt at the time of the Israelitic captivity were far older than even the Egyptians themselves realized. Histories were difficult to compile in those days, and the Egyptians were satisfied to trace their race back to a mythological period when the gods themselves walked the earth and with their own power established the double empire of the Nile. The Egyptians did not dream that these divine progenitors were the Atlanteans, who, forced to abandon their 7 islands because of volcanic cataclysms, had immigrated into Egypt, then an Atlantean colony, where they established a great philosophic and literary center of civilization, which was later to influence profoundly the religions and science of unnumbered races and peoples. Today, Egypt is forgotten, but things Egyptian will always be remembered and revered. Egypt is dead, yet it lives immortal in its philosophy and architectonics. As Odin founded his mysteries in Scandinavia and Quetzalcoatl in Mexico, so Moses, laboring with the then nomadic people of Israel's 12 tribes, established in the midst of them his secret and symbolic school, which has come to be known as the Tabernacle Mysteries. The Tabernacle of the Jews was merely a temple patterned after the temples of Egypt and transportable to meet the needs of that roving disposition which the Israelites were famous. Every part of the tabernacle and the enclosure which surrounded it was symbolic of some great natural or philosophic truth. To the ignorant, it was but a place which to bring offerings and in which to make sacrifice. To the wise it was a temple of learning, sacred to the universal spirit of wisdom. While the greatest minds of the Jewish and Christian worlds have realized that the Bible is a book of allegories, few seem to have taken the trouble to investigate its symbols and parables. When Moses instituted his mysteries, he is said to have given to a chosen few initiates certain oral teachings which could never be written, but were to be preserved from one generation to the next by word-of-mouth transmission. Those instructions were in the form of philosophical keys, by means of which the allegories were made to reveal their hidden significance. These mystic keys to their sacred writings were called by the Jews the Kabbalah. The modern world seems to have forgotten the existence of those unwritten teachings which explained satisfactorily the apparent contradictions of the written scriptures, nor does it remember that the pagans appointed their two-faced Janus as custodian of the key to the temple of wisdom. Janus has been metamorphosed into St. Peter, so often symbolized as holding in his hand the key to the gate of heaven. The gold and silver keys of God's vicar on earth, the Pope, symbolizes this secret doctrine which, when properly understood, unlocks the treasure chest of the Christian and Jewish Kabbalah. The temples of Egyptian mysticism, from which the tabernacle was copied, were, according to their own priests, miniature representations of the universe. The solar system was always regarded as a great temple of initiation, which candidates entered through the gates of birth. After threading the tortuous passageways of earthly existence, they finally approached the veil of the great mystery, death, through whose gate they vanished back into the invisible world. Socrates subtly reminded his disciples that death was, in reality, the great initiation, for his last words were, "Crito, I owe a cock to Asclepius. Will you remember to pay the debt? As the rooster was sacred to the gods and the sacrifice of this bird accompanied a candidate's introduction into the mysteries, Socrates implied that he was about to take his great initiation. Life is the great mystery, and only those who pass successfully through its tests and trials, interpreting them aright and extracting the essence of experience therefrom, achieve true understanding. Thus the temples were built in the form of the world, and their rituals were based upon life and its multitudinous problems. Nor only was the tabernacle itself patterned according to Egyptian mysticism, its utensils were also of ancient and accepted form. The Ark of the Covenant itself was an adaptation of the Egyptian Ark, even to the kneeling figures upon its lid. Bas-reliefs on the Temple of Philae show Egyptian priests carrying the Ark, which closely resemble the Ark of the Jews, upon their shoulders by means of staves, like those described in Exodus. The Ancient of Days. From Montfaucon's Antiquities. It is in this form that Jehovah is generally pictured by the Kabbalists. The drawing is intended to represent the demiurgus of the Greeks and Gnostics, called by the Greeks Zeus, the immortal mortal, and by the Hebrews Yehovah. The following description of the tabernacle and its priests is based upon the account of its construction and ceremonies recorded by Josephus in the third book of his Antiquities of the Jews. The Bible references are from a Breeches Bible, famous for its rendering of the 7th verse of the 3rd chapter of Genesis, printed in London in 1599, and the quotations are reproduced in their original spelling and punctuation. The building of the tabernacle. Moses, speaking for Jehovah, the God of Israel, appointed 2 architects to superintend the building of the tabernacle. They were Bezaleel, the son of Uri, the tribe of Judah, and Aholiab, the son of Ahisamach, of the tribe of Dan. Their popularity was so great that they were also the unanimous choice of the people. When Jacob, upon his deathbed, blessed his sons, see Genesis, he assigned to each a symbol. The symbol of Judah was a lion, that of Dan a serpent or a bird, possibly an eagle. The lion and the eagle are 2 of the 4 beasts of the cherubim, the fixed signs of the zodiac, and the Rosicrucian alchemists maintain that the mysterious stone of the wise, the soul, was compounded with the aid of the blood of the red lion and the gluten of the white eagle. It seems probable that there is a hidden mystic relationship between fire, the red lion, water, the white eagle, as they were used in occult chemistry, and the representatives of these 2 tribes, whose symbols were identical with these alchemical elements. As the tabernacle was the dwelling place of God among men, likewise the soul body in man is the dwelling place of his divine nature, round which gathers a 12-fold material constitution in the same manner that the tribes of Israel camped about the enclosure sacred to Jehovah. The idea that the tabernacle was really symbolic of an invisible spiritual truth outside the comprehension of the Israelites is substantiated by a statement made in the 8th chapter of Hebrews. Who serve unto the pattern and shadow of heavenly things, as Moses was warned by God when he was about to finish the tabernacle. Here we find the material physical place of worship, called a shadow or symbol of a spiritual institution, invisible but omnipotent. The specifications of the tabernacle are described in the book of Exodus, 25th chapter. Then the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, that they receive an offering for me. Of every man, whose heart giveth it freely, ye shall take the offering for me. And this is the offering which ye shall take of them, gold and silver, and brass, and blue silk, and purple, and scarlet, and fine linen, and goat's hair, and ram skins colored red, and the skins of badgers, and the wood of shittim, oil for the light, spices for anointing oil, and for the perfume of sweet favor, onyx stones, and stories to be set in the ephod, and in the breastplate. Also they shall make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them. According to all that I show thee, even so shall ye make the form of the tabernacle, and the fashion of all the instruments thereof. The court of the tabernacle was an enclosed area, 50 cubits wide and 100 cubits long, circumscribed by a wall of linen curtains hung from brazen pillars, 5 cubits apart. The cubit is an ancient standard of measurement, its length being equal to the distance between the elbow and the extreme end of the index finger, approximately 18 inches. There were 20 of these pillars on each of the longer sides and 10 on the shorter. Each pillar had a base of brass and a capital of silver. The tabernacle was always laid out with the long sides facing north and south and the short sides facing east and west, with the entrance to the east, thus showing the influence of primitive sun worship. The outer court served the principal purpose of isolating the tent of the tabernacle proper, which stood in the midst of the enclosure. At the entrance to the courtyard, which was in the eastern face of the rectangle, stood the altar of burnt offerings, made of brass plates over wood and ornamented with the horns of bulls and rams. Farther on, but on a line with this altar, stood the laver of purification, a great vessel containing water for priestly ablutions. The laver was twofold in its construction, the upper part being a large bowl, probably covered, which served as a source of supply for a lower basin in which the priests bathed themselves before participating in the various ceremonials. It is supposed that this laver was encrusted with the metal mirrors of the women of the 12 tribes of Israel. The dimensions of the tabernacle proper were as follows. Its length, when it was set up, was 30 cubits, and its breadth was 10 cubits. The one of its walls was on the south, and the other was exposed to the north, and on the back part of it remained the west. It was necessary that this height should be equal to its breadth, 10 cubits. Josephus. It is the custom of bibliologists to divide the interior of the tabernacle into 2 rooms, one room 10 cubits wide, 10 cubits high, and 20 cubits long, which was called the Holy Place, and contained 3 special articles of furniture, namely the 7-branched candlestick, the table of the showbread, and the altar of burnt incense. The other room, 10 cubits wide, 10 cubits high, and 10 cubits long, which was called the Holy of Holies, and contained but 1 article of furniture, the Ark of the Covenant. The 2 rooms were separated from each other by an ornamental veil upon which were embroidered many kinds of flowers, but no animal or human figures. Josephus hints that there was a 3rd compartment which was formed by subdividing the holy place, at least hypothetically, into 2 chambers. The Jewish historian is not very explicit in his description of this 3rd room, and the majority of writers seem to have entirely overlooked and neglected this point, although Josephus emphatically states that Moses himself divided the inner tent into 3 sections. The veil separating the holy place from the Holy of Holies was hung across 4 pillars, which probably indicated in a subtle way the 4 elements, while at the entrance to the tent proper, the Jews placed 7 pillars, referring to the 7 senses and the 7 vowels of the sacred name. That later only 5 pillars are mentioned may be accounted for by the fact that at the present time man has only 5 developed senses and 5 active vowels. The early Jewish writer of the Baraita treats of the curtains as follows. They were provided 10 curtains of blue, of purple, and scarlet, and fine twined linen. As is said, Moreover, thou shalt make the tabernacle with 10 curtains of fine twined linen, and blue and purple and scarlet. There were provided 11 curtains of goat's hair, and the length of every one of them was 30 cubits. Rabbi Judah said, there were 2 covers, the lower one of ram skins dyed red, and the upper one of badger skins. Calmet is of the opinion that the Hebrew word translated badger really means dark purple, and therefore did not refer to any particular animal, but probably to a heavily woven waterproof fabric of dark and inconspicuous color. During the time of Israel's wanderings through the wilderness, it is supposed that a pillar of fire hovered over the tabernacle at night, while a column of smoke traveled with it by day. This cloud was called by the Jews the Shekinah, and was symbolic of the presence of the Lord. In one of the early Jewish books rejected at the time of the compiling of the Talmud, the following description of the Shekinah appears. Then a cloud covered the tent of the congregation, and the glory of the Lord filled the tabernacle. And that was one of the clouds of glory which served the Israelites in the wilderness 40 years. One on the right hand, and one on the left, and one before them, and one behind them, and one over them, and a cloud dwelling in their midst, and the cloud, the Shekinah, which was in the tent, and the pillar of cloud which moved before them, making low before them the high places, and making high before them the low places, and killing serpents and scorpions, and burning thorns and briars, and guiding them in the straight way. From the Baraita, the Book of the Tabernacle. The furnishings of the tabernacle. There is no doubt that the tabernacle, its furnishings and ceremonials, when considered esoterically, are analogous to the structure, organs, and functions of the human body. At the entrance to the outer court of the tabernacle stood the altar of burnt offerings, 5 cubits long and 5 cubits wide, but only 3 cubits high. Its upper surface was a brazen grill upon which the sacrifice was placed, while beneath was a space for the fire. This altar signified that a candidate, when first entering the precincts of sanctuary, must offer upon the brazen altar not a poor, unoffending bull or ram, but its correspondence within his own nature. The bull, being symbolic of earthiness, represented his own gross constitution, which must be burned up by the fire of his divinity. The sacrificing of beasts, and in some cases human beings, upon the altars of the pagans was the result of their ignorance concerning the fundamental principle underlying sacrifice. They did not realize that their offerings must come from within their own natures in order to be acceptable. Farther westward, in line with the brazen altar, was the laver of purification, already described. It signified to the priest that he should cleanse not only his body, but also his soul, from all stains of impurity, for none who is not clean in both body and mind can enter into the presence of divinity and live. Beyond the laver of purification was the entrance to the tabernacle proper, facing the east, so that the first rays of the rising sun might enter and light the chamber. Between the encrusted pillars could be seen the holy place, a mysterious chamber, its walls hung with magnificent drapes embroidered with the faces of cherubs. The breastplate of the high priest, from Calmet's Dictionary of the Holy Bible. The order of the stones and the tribe over which each administered were, according to Calmet, as in the above diagram. These gems, according to the Rosicrucians, were symbolic of the 12 great qualities and virtues: illumination, love, wisdom, truth, justice, peace, equilibrium, humility, faith, strength, joy, victory. Against the wall on the southern side of the holy place stood the great candlestick, or lampstand, of cast gold which was believed to weigh about 100 pounds. From its central shaft branched out 6 arms, each ending in a cup-shaped depression in which stood an oil lamp. There were 7 lamps, 3 on the arms at each side and 1 on the central stem. The candlestick was ornamented with 72 almonds, knops, and flowers. Josephus says 70, but wherever this round number is used by the Hebrews, it really means 72. Opposite the candlestick, against the northern wall, was a table bearing 12 loaves of showbread, in 2 stacks of 6 loaves each. Calmet is of the opinion that the bread was not stacked up, but spread out on the table in 2 rows, each containing 6 loaves. On this table also stood 2 lighted incensaries, which were placed upon the tops of the stacks of showbread, so that the smoke of the incense might be an acceptable aroma to the Lord, bearing with it in its ascent the soul of the showbread. In the center of the room, almost against the partition leading into the Holy of Holies, stood the altar of burnt incense, made of wood overlaid with golden plates. Its width and length were each a cubit, and its height was 2 cubits. This altar was symbolic of the human larynx, from which the words of man's mouth ascend as an acceptable offering unto the Lord. For the larynx occupies the position in the constitution of man between the holy place, which is the trunk of his body, and the Holy of Holies, which is the head with its contents. Into the Holy of Holies none might pass save the high priest, and he only at certain prescribed times. The room contained no furnishings save the Ark of the Covenant, which stood against the western wall, opposite the entrance. In Exodus, the dimensions of the ark are given as 2.5 cubits for its length, 1 cubit and a half its breadth, and 1 cubit and a half its height. It was made of shittim wood, gold-plated within and without, and contained the sacred tablets of the law delivered to Moses upon Sinai. The lid of the ark was in the form of a golden plate upon which knelt 2 mysterious creatures called cherubim, facing each other, with wings arched overhead. It was upon this mercy seat between the wings of these celestials that the Lord of Israel descended when he desired to communicate with his high priest. The furnishings of the tabernacle were made conveniently portable. Each altar and implement of any size was supplied with staves, which could be put through rings. By this means it could be picked up and carried by 4 or more bearers. The staves were never removed from the Ark of the Covenant until it was finally placed in the Holy of Holies of the everlasting house, King Solomon's temple. There is no doubt that the Jews in early times realized, at least in part, that their tabernacle was a symbolic edifice. Josephus realized this, and while he has been severely criticized because he interpreted the tabernacle symbolism according to Egyptian and Grecian paganism, his description of the secret meanings of its drapes and furnishings is well worthy of consideration. He says, "When Moses distinguished the tabernacle into 3 parts, and allowed 2 of them to the priests, as a place accessible and common, he denoted the land and the sea, these being of general access to all. But he set apart the 3rd division for God, because heaven is inaccessible to men. And when he ordered 12 loaves to be set on a table, he denoted the year as distinguished into so many months. By branching out the candlestick into 70 parts, he secretly intimated the decani, or 70 divisions of the planets. And as to the 7 lamps upon the candlesticks, they refer to the course of the planets, of which that is the number. The veils, too, which were composed of 4 things, they declared the 4 elements, for the plain linen was proper to signify the earth, because the flax grows out of the earth, and the purple signified the sea, because that color is dyed by the blood of a sea-shell fish. The blue is fit to signify the air, and the scarlet will naturally be an indication of fire. Now the vestment of the high priest, being made of linen, signified the earth. The blue denoted the sky, being like lightning in its pomegranates, and in the noise of the bells resembling thunder. And for the ephod, it showed that God had made the universe of 4 elements, and as for the gold interwoven, it related to the splendor by which all things are enlightened. He also appointed the breastplate to be placed in the middle of the ephod, to resemble the earth, for that has the very middle place of the world. And the girdle, which encompassed the high priest round, signified the ocean, for that goes round about and includes the universe. Each of these sardonyxes declared to us the sun and the moon, those, I mean, that were in the nature of buttons on the high priest's shoulders. And for the 12 stones, whether we understand them by the months, or whether we understand them like the number of the signs that encircle, which the Greeks call the zodiac, we shall not be mistaken in their meaning. And for the mitre, which was of a blue color, it seems to me to mean heaven, for how otherwise could the name of God be inscribed upon it? That it was also illustrated with a crown, and that of gold also, is because of that splendor with which God is pleased. It is also symbolically significant that the tabernacle was built in 7 months and dedicated to God at the time of the new moon. The metals used in the building of the tabernacle were all emblematic. Gold represents spirituality, and the golden plates laid over the shittim wood were emblems of the spiritual nature which glorifies the human nature symbolized by the wood. Mystics have taught that man's physical body is surrounded by a series of invisible bodies of diverse colors and great splendor. In the majority of people, the spiritual nature is concealed and imprisoned in the material nature, but in a few, this internal constitution has been objectified and the spiritual nature is outside, so that it surrounds man's personality with a great radiance. Silver, used as the capitals for the pillars, has its reference to the moon, which was sacred to the Jews and the Egyptians alike. The priests held secret ritualistic ceremonies at the time of the new and the full moon, both of which periods were sacred to Jehovah. Silver, so the ancients taught, was gold with its sun ray turned inward instead of objectified. While gold symbolized the spiritual soul, silver represented the purified and regenerated human nature of man. The brass used in the outer altars was a composite substance consisting of an alloy of precious and base metals. Thus it represented the constitution of the average individual, who is a combination of both the higher and the lower elements. The 3 divisions of the tabernacle should have a special interest to Freemasons, for they represent the 3 degrees of the Blue Lodge, while the 3 orders of priests who serve the tabernacle are preserved to modern masonry as the entered apprentice, the fellow craftsman, and the master mason. The Hawaiian Islanders built a tabernacle not unlike that of the Jews, except that their rooms were one above another and not one behind another, as in the case of the tabernacle of the Israelites. The 3 rooms are also the 3 important chambers of the Great Pyramid of Giza. The robes of glory. As explained in the quotation from Josephus, the robes and adornments of the Jewish priests had a secret significance, and even to this day there is a religious cipher language concealed in the colors, forms, and uses of sacred garments, not only among the Christian and Jewish priests, but also among pagan religions. The vestments of the tabernacle priests were called kakaneye, Those of the high priest were termed kekaneye rabbe. Over the macanes, an undergarment resembling short trousers, they wore the keton, a finely woven linen robe which reached to the ground and had long sleeves tied to the arms of the wearer. A brightly embroidered sash, twisted several times around the waist, a little higher than is customary, with one end pendant in front, and a closely fitting linen cap, designated masneemphates, completed the costume of the ordinary priest. The garments of glory, from Mosai's History der Hebreeuskirche. The robe of the high priest of Israel were often called the garments of glory, for they resembled the regenerated and spiritualized nature of man, symbolized by a vestment which all must weave from the threads of character and virtue before they can become high priests after the order of Melchizedek. The vestments of the high priest were the same as those of the lesser degrees, except that certain garments and adornments were added. Over the specially woven white linen robe, the high priest wore a seamless and sleeveless habit, sky blue in color and reaching nearly to his feet. This was called the mir, and was ornamented with a fringe of alternated golden bells and pomegranates. In Ecclesiasticus, one of the books rejected from the modern Bible, these bells and their purpose are described in the following words. And he compassed him with pomegranates, and with many golden bells round about, that, as he went, there might be a sound and a noise that might be heard in the temple, for a memorial to the children of his people. The mir was also bound in with a variegated girdle finely embroidered, and with gold wire inserted through the embroidery. The ephod, a short vestment described by Josephus as resembling a coat or jacket, was worn over the upper part of the mir. The threads of which the ephod was woven were of many colors, probably red, blue, purple, and white, like the curtains and coverings of the tabernacle. Fine gold wires were also woven into the fabric. The ephod was fastened at each shoulder with a large onyx in the form of a button, and the names of the 12 sons of Jacob were engraven upon these 2 stones, 6 on each. These onyx buttons were supposed to have oracular powers, and when the high priest asked certain questions, they emitted a celestial radiance. When the onyx on the right shoulder was illuminated, it signified that Jehovah answered the question of the high priest in the affirmative, and when the one on the left gleamed, it indicated a negative answer to the query. In the middle of the front surface of the ephod was a space to accommodate the esen, or breastplate of righteousness and prophecy, which, as its name signifies, was also an oracle of great power. This pectoral was roughly square in shape and consisted of a frame of embroidery, into which were set 12 stones, each held in a socket of gold. Because of the great weight of its stones, each of which was of considerable size and immense value, the breastplate was held in position by special golden chains and ribbons. The 12 stones of the breastplate, like the onyx stones at the shoulders of the ephod, had the mysterious power of lighting up with divine glory, and so serving as oracles. Concerning the strange power of these flashing symbols of Israel's 12 tribes, Josephus writes, "Yet will I mention what is still more wonderful than this, for God declared beforehand, by those 12 stones which the high priest bare upon his breast and which were inserted into his breastplate, when they should be victorious in battle, for so great a splendor shone forth from them before the army began to march, that all the people were sensible of God's being present for their assistance. Whence it came to pass that those Greeks, who had a veneration for our laws, because they could not possibly contradict this, called the breastplate the oracle." The writer then adds that the stones ceased to light up and gleam some 200 years before he wrote his history, because the Jews had broken the laws of Jehovah, and the God of Israel was no longer pleased with his chosen people. The Jews learned astronomy from the Egyptians, and it is not unlikely that the 12 jewels of the breastplate were symbolic of the 12 constellations of the zodiac. These 12 celestial hierarchies were looked upon as jewels adorning the breastplate of the universal man, the Macroprosophus, who is referred to in the Zohar as the Ancient of Days. The number 12 frequently occurs among ancient peoples, who in nearly every case had a pantheon consisting of 12 demigods and goddesses, presided over by the Invincible One, who was himself subject to the incomprehensible All-Father. This use of the number 12 is especially noted in the Jewish and Christian writings. The 12 prophets, the 12 patriarchs, the 12 tribes, and the 12 apostles. Each group has a certain occult significance, for each refers to the divine duodecimo, or 12-fold deity, whose emanations are manifested in the tangible created universe through 12 individualized channels. The secret doctrine also taught the priests that the jewels represented centers of life within their own constitutions, which, when unfolded, according to the esoteric instructions of the temple, were capable of absorbing into themselves and radiating forth again the divine light of the deity. The East Indian lotus blossoms have a similar meaning. The rabbis have taught that each twisted linen thread used in weaving the tabernacle curtains and ornamentations consisted of 24 separate strands, reminding the discerning that the experience, gained during the 24 hours of the day, symbolized in masonry by the 24-inch rule, becomes the threads from which are woven the garments of glory. The Urim and Thummim. In the reverse side of the essen, or breastplate, was a pocket containing mysterious objects, the Urim and Thummim. Aside from the fact that they were used in divination, little is known about these objects. Some writers contend that they were small stones, resembling the fetishes still revered by certain aboriginal peoples, which the Israelites had brought with them out of Egypt because of their belief that they possessed divine power. Others believe that the Urim and Thummim were in the form of dice, used for deciding events by being cast upon the ground. A few have maintained that they were merely sacred names, written on plates of gold and carried as talismans. According to some, the Urim and Thummim signify lights and perfections, or light and truth, which last present a striking analogy to the two figures of Re, or Ra, and Themi in the breastplate worn by the Egyptians. Gardeners, the faiths of the world. Not the least remarkable of the vestments of the high priest was his bonnet, or headdress. Over the plain white cap of the ordinary priest, this dignitary wore an outer cloth of blue and a crown of gold, the crown consisting of 3 bands, one above the other like the triple mitre of the Persian magi. The crown symbolized that the high priest was ruler not only over the 3 worlds which the ancients had differentiated, heaven, earth, and hell, but also over the threefold divisions of man and the universe, the spiritual, intellectual, and material worlds. These divisions were also symbolized by the 3 apartments of the tabernacle itself. The headdress of the priests, from Mosse's History der Hebreeuws Kirke. Over the plain white cap of the ordinary priests, the high priest wore an overcloth of blue and a band of gold. On the front of the golden band were inscribed the Hebrew words, "Holiness unto the Lord." This illustration shows the arrangement of the bonnet both with and without the golden crown. At the peak of the headdress was a tiny cup of gold, made in the form of a flower. This signified that the nature of the priest was receptive, and that he had a vessel in his own soul which, cup-like, was capable of catching the eternal waters of life pouring upon him from the heavens above. This flower over the crown of his head is similar in its esoteric meaning to the rose growing out of a skull, so famous in Templar symbology. The ancients believed that the spiritual nature escaping from the body passed upward through the crown of the head. Therefore, the flower-like calyx, or cup, symbolized also the spiritual consciousness. On the front of the golden crown were inscribed in Hebrew, "Holiness unto the Lord." Though robes and ornaments augmented the respect and veneration of the Israelites for their high priest, such trappings meant nothing to Jehovah. Therefore, before entering the Holy of Holies, the high priest removed his earthly finery and entered into the presence of the Lord God of Israel unclothed. There he could be robed only in his own virtues, and his spirituality must adorn him as a garment. There is a legend to the effect that any who chanced to enter the Holy of Holies unclean were destroyed by a bolt of divine fire from the mercy seat. If the high priest had but one selfish thought, he would be struck dead. As no man knows when an unworthy thought may flash through his mind, precautions had to be taken in case the high priest should be struck dead while in the presence of Jehovah. The other priests could not enter the sanctuary. Therefore, when their leader was about to go in and receive the commands of the Lord, they tied a chain around one of his feet so that if he were struck down while behind the veil, they could drag the body out. The Ark with its cherubim. From Calmet's Dictionary of the Holy Bible, Josephus tells us that the cherubim were flying creatures, but different in appearance from anything to be seen on earth, therefore impossible to describe. Moses is supposed to have seen these beings kneeling at the footstool of God when he was picked up and brought into the presence of Jehovah. It is probable that they resembled, at least in general appearance, the famous cherubim of Ezekiel. The Fraternity of the Rose Cross. Who were the Rosicrucians? Were they an organization of profound thinkers rebelling against the inquisitional religious and philosophical limitations of their time, or were they isolated transcendentalists united only by the similarity of their viewpoints and deductions? Where was the House of the Holy Spirit, in which, according to their manifestos, they met once a year to plan the future activities of their order? Who was the mysterious person referred to as our illustrious father and brother, CRC? Did those three letters actually stand for the words Christian Rosy Cross? Was Christian Rosenkreutz, the supposed author of the Chemical Nuptials, the same person who with the three others founded the Society of the Rose Cross? What relationship existed between Rosicrucianism and medieval Freemasonry? Why were the destinies of these two organizations so closely interwoven? Is the Brotherhood of the Rose Cross the much sought-after link connecting the Freemasonry of the Middle Ages with the symbolism and mysticism of antiquity, and are its secrets being perpetuated by modern Masonry? Did the original Rosicrucian order disintegrate in the latter part of the 18th century, or does the society still exist as an organization, maintaining the same secrecy for which it was originally famous? What was the true purpose for which the Brotherhood of the Rose Cross was formed? Were the Rosicrucians a religious and philosophical brotherhood, as they claimed to be, or were their avowed tenets a blind to conceal the true object of the fraternity, which possibly was the political control of Europe? These are some of the problems involved in the study of Rosicrucianism. There are four distinct theories regarding the Rosicrucian enigma. Each is the result of a careful consideration of the evidence by scholars who have spent their lives ransacking the archives of Hermetic lore. The conclusions reached demonstrate clearly the inadequacy of the records available concerning the genesis and early activities of the Brethren of the Rose Cross. The first postulate. It is assumed that the Rosicrucian order existed historically in accordance with the description of its foundation and subsequent activities published in its manifesto, the Fama Fraternitatis, which is believed to have been written in the year 1610, but apparently did not appear in print until 1614, although an earlier edition is suspected by some authorities. Intelligent consideration of the origin of Rosicrucianism requires a familiarity with the contents of the first and most important of its documents. The Fama Fraternitatis begins with a reminder to all the world of God's goodness and mercy, and it warns the intelligentsia that their egotism and covetousness cause them to follow after false prophets and ignore the true knowledge which God, in His goodness, has revealed to them. Hence a reformation is necessary, and God has raised up philosophers and sages for this purpose. In order to assist in bringing about the Reformation, a mysterious person called the Highly Illuminated Father CRC, a German by birth, descended of a noble family, but himself a poor man, instituted the secret society of the Rose Cross. CRC was placed in a cloister when only 5 years of age, but later becoming dissatisfied with its educational system, he associated himself with a brother of holy orders who was setting forth on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. They started out together, but the brother died at Cyprus and CRC continued alone to Damascus. Poor health prevented him from reaching Jerusalem, so he remained at Damascus, studying with the philosophers who dwelt there. While pursuing his studies, he heard of a group of mystics and Kabbalists abiding in the mystic Arabian city of Damkar. Giving up his desire to visit Jerusalem, he arranged with the Arabians for his transportation to Damkar. CRC was but 16 years of age when he arrived at Damkar. He was received as one who had been long expected, a comrade and a friend in philosophy, and was instructed in the secrets of the Arabian adepts. While there, CRC learned the Arabic tongue and translated the book M into Latin, and upon returning to Europe he brought this important volume with him. After studying 3 years in Damkar, CRC departed for the city of Fez, where the Arabian magicians declared further information would be given him. At Fez, he was instructed how to communicate with the elementary inhabitants, probably the nature spirits, and these disclosed to him many other great secrets of nature. While the philosophers in Fez were not so great as those in Damkar, the previous experiences of CRC enabled him to distinguish the true from the false, and thus add greatly to his store of knowledge. After 2 years in Fez, CRC sailed for Spain, carrying with him many treasures, among them rare plants and animals accumulated during his wanderings. He fondly hoped that the learned men of Europe would receive with gratitude the rare intellectual and material treasures which he had brought for their consideration. Instead, he encountered only ridicule, for the so-called wise were afraid to admit their previous ignorance, lest their prestige be impaired. At this point in the narrative is an interpolation stating that Paracelsus, while not a member of the Fraternity of the Rose Cross, had read the book M, and from a consideration of its contents, had secured information which made him the foremost physician of medieval Europe. Tired but not discouraged as the result of the fruitlessness of his efforts, CRC returned to Germany, where he built a house in which he could quietly carry on his study and research. He also manufactured a number of rare scientific instruments for research purposes. While he could have made himself famous had he cared to commercialize his knowledge, he preferred the companionship of God to the esteem of men. After 5 years of retirement, he decided to renew his struggle for a reformation of the arts and sciences of his day, this time with the aid of a few trusted friends. He sent to the cloister, where his early training had been received, and called to himself 3 brethren, whom he bound by an oath to preserve inviolate the secrets he should impart and to write down for the sake of posterity the information he should dictate. These 4 founded the Fraternity of the Rose Cross. They prepared its secret cipher language and, according to the Fama, a great dictionary in which all forms of wisdom were classified to the glorification of God. They also began the work of transcribing the book M, but found the task too difficult because of the demands of the great numbers of sick who came to them for healing. The Golden and Rosy Cross, from Geheime Figuren der Rosenkreuzer. It is said of this cross that it is made of spiritual gold, and that each brother wears it upon his breast. It bears the alchemical symbols of salt, sulfur, and mercury, and also a star of the planets, and around it are the 4 words, faith, hope, love, and patience. The double-headed eagle, or phoenix, subtly foreshadows the ultimate androgynous state of the human creature. Rosicrucian alchemy was not concerned with metals alone. Man's own body was the alchemical laboratory, and none could reach Rosicrucian adeptship until he had performed the supreme experiment of transmutation by changing the base metals of ignorance into the pure gold of wisdom and understanding. Having completed a newer and larger building, which they called the House of the Holy Spirit, they decided to include 4 new members in the fraternity, thus increasing the number to 8, 7 of whom were German. All were unmarried. Working industriously together, they speedily completed the arduous labor of preparing the documents, instructions, and arcana of the order. They also put the house called Sancti Spiritus in order. They then decided to separate and visit the other countries of the earth, not only that their wisdom might be given to others who deserved it, but also that they might check and correct any mistakes existing in their own system. Before separating, the brethren prepared 6 rules, or bylaws, and each bound himself to obey them. The first rule was that they should take to themselves no other dignity or credit than that they were willing to heal the sick without charge. The second was that from that time on forever they should wear no special robe or garment, but should dress according to the custom of the country wherein they dwelt. The third stated that every year upon a certain day they should meet in the House of the Holy Spirit, or, if unable to do so, should be represented by an epistle. The fourth decreed that each member should search for a worthy person to succeed him at his own demise. The fifth stated that the letters R.C. should be their seal, mark, and character from that time onward. The sixth specified that the fraternity should remain unknown to the world for a period of 100 years. After they had sworn to this code, 5 of the brothers departed to distant lands, and a year later 2 of the others also went their way, leaving Father CRC alone in the House of the Holy Spirit. Year after year they met with great joy, for they had quietly and sincerely promulgated their doctrines among the wise of the earth. When the first of the order died in England, it was decided that the burial places of the members should be secret. Soon afterward, Father CRC called the remaining 6 together, and it is supposed that then he prepared his own symbolic tomb. The Fama records that none of the brothers alive at the time of its writing knew when Father CRC died or where he was buried. His body was accidentally discovered 120 years after his death when one of the brothers, who possessed considerable architectural skill, decided to make some alterations in the House of the Holy Spirit. It is only suspected that the tomb was in this building. While making his alterations, the brother discovered a memorial tablet upon which were inscribed the names of the early members of the order. This he decided to transfer to a more imposing chapel, for at that time no one knew in what country Father CRC had died, this information having been concealed by the original members. In attempting to remove the memorial tablet, which was held in place by a large nail, some stones and plastering were broken from the wall, disclosing a door concealed in the masonry. The members of the order immediately cleared away the rest of the debris and uncovered the entrance to a vault. Upon the door in large letters were the words, Post 120 annos patebo. This, according to the mystic interpretation of the brethren, meant, in 120 years I shall come forth. The following morning the door was opened and the members entered a vault with 7 sides and 7 corners, each side 5 feet broad and 8 feet high. Although the sun never penetrated this tomb, it was brilliantly illuminated by a mysterious light in the ceiling. In the center was a circular altar, upon which were brass plates engraved with strange characters. In each of these 7 sides was a small door which, upon being opened, revealed a number of boxes filled with books, secret instructions, and the supposedly lost arcanum of the fraternity. Upon moving the altar to one side, a brass cover was disclosed. Lifting this revealed a body, presumably that of CRC, which, although it had lain there 120 years, was as well preserved as though it had just been interred. It was ornamented and attired in the robes of the order, and in one hand was clasped a mysterious parchment which, next to the Bible, was the most valued possession of the society. After thoroughly investigating the contents of the secret chamber, the brass plate and altar were put back in place, the door of the vault was again sealed, and the brothers went their respective ways, their spirits raised and their faith increased by the miraculous spectacle which they had beheld. The document ends by saying, in effect, in accordance with the will of Father CRC, the Fama has been prepared and sent forth to the wise and learned of all Europe in 5 languages, that all may know and understand the secrets of the august fraternity. All of sincere soul who labor for the glory of God are invited to communicate with the brethren and are promised that their appeal shall be heard, regardless of where they are or how the messages are sent. At the same time, those of selfish and ulterior motives are warned that only sorrow and misery will attend any who attempt to discover the fraternity without a clean heart and a pure mind. Such, in brief, is the story of the Fama Fraternitatis. Those who accept it literally regard Father CRC as the actual founder of the Brotherhood, which he is believed to have organized about 1400. The fact that historical corroboration of the important points of the Fama has never been discovered is held against this theory. There is no proof that Father CRC ever approached the learned men of Spain. The mysterious city of Damkar cannot be found, and there is no record that anywhere in Germany there existed a place where great numbers of the sick came and were mysteriously healed. A. E. Waite's The Secret Tradition in Freemasonry contains a picture of Father CRC showing him with a long beard upon his breast, sitting before a table upon which burns a candle. One hand is supporting his head and the other is resting, the tip of its index finger, on the temple of a human skull. The picture, however, see plate at head of chapter, proves nothing. Father CRC was never seen by other than members of his own order, and they did not preserve a description of him. That his name was Christian Rosenkreutz is most improbable, as the two were not even associated until the writing of the chemical nuptials. The second postulate. Those Masonic brethren who have investigated the subject accept the historical existence of the Brotherhood of the Rose Cross, but are divided concerning the origin of the order. One group holds the society originated in medieval Europe as an outgrowth of alchemical speculation. Robert McCoy, 33rd degree, believes that Johann Valentin Andrei, a German theologian, was the true founder, and he also believes it is possible that this divine merely reformed and amplified an existing society which had been founded by Sir Henry Cornelius Agrippa. Some believe that Rosicrucianism represented the first European invasion of Buddhist and Brahmin culture. Still, others hold the opinion that the Society of the Rose Cross was founded in Egypt during the philosophic supremacy of that empire, and that it also perpetuated the mysteries of ancient Persia and Chaldea. In his Anacalypsis, Godfrey Higgins writes, "The Rosicrucians of Germany are quite ignorant of their origin. but by tradition they supposed themselves descendants of the ancient Egyptians, Chaldeans, and Gymnosophists. The last was a name given by the followers of Alexander the Great to a caste of naked wise men whom they found meditating along the riverbanks in India. The consensus among these factions is that the story of Father CRC, like the Masonic legend of Hiram Abiff, is an allegory and should not be considered literally. A similar problem has confronted students of the Bible, who have found not only difficult, but in the majority of cases impossible, their efforts to substantiate the historical interpretation of the scriptures. Admitting the existence of the Rosicrucians as a secret society with both philosophic and political ends, it is remarkable that an organization with members in all parts of Europe could maintain absolute secrecy throughout the centuries. Nevertheless, the Brothers of the Rose Cross were apparently able to accomplish this. A great number of scholars and philosophers, among them Sir Francis Bacon and Wolfgang von Goethe, have been suspected of affiliation with the order, but their connection has not been established to the satisfaction of prosaic historians. Pseudo-Rosicrucians abounded, but the true members of the ancient and secret order of the unknown philosophers have successfully lived up to their name. To this day, they remain unknown. During the Middle Ages, a number of tracts appeared, purporting to be from the pens of Rosicrucians. Many of them, however, were spurious, being issued for their self-aggrandizement by unscrupulous persons who used the revered and magic name Rosicrucian in the hope of gaining religious or political power. This has greatly complicated the work of investigating the society. One group of pseudo-Rosicrucians went so far as to supply its members with a black cord by which they were to know each other, and warned them that if they broke their vow of secrecy, the cord would be used to strangle them. Few of the principles of Rosicrucianism have been preserved in literature, for the original fraternity published only fragmentary accounts of its principles and activities. In his Secret Symbols of the Rosicrucians, Dr. Franz Hartmann describes the fraternity as a secret society of men possessing superhuman, if not supernatural, powers. They were said to be able to prophesy future events, to penetrate into the deepest mysteries of nature, to transform iron, copper, lead, or mercury into gold, to prepare an elixir of life, or universal panacea, by the use of which they could preserve their youth and manhood, and moreover it was believed that they could command the elemental spirits of nature, and knew the secret of the philosopher's stone, a substance which rendered him who possessed it all-powerful, immortal, and supremely wise. The Crucified Rose. The original symbol of the Rosicrucian fraternity was a hieroglyphic rose crucified upon a cross. The cross was often raised upon a three-stepped Calvary. Occasionally, the symbol of a cross rising from a rose was used in connection with their activities. The Rosicrucian rose was drawn upon the Round Table of King Arthur, and is the central motif for the links forming the chain from which the Great George is suspended among the jewels of the Order of the Garter. Hargreave Jennings suspects this order of having some connection with the Rosicrucians. The same author further defines a Rosicrucian as a person who by the process of spiritual awakening has attained a practical knowledge of the secret significance of the rose and the cross. To call a person a Rosicrucian does not make him one, nor does the act of calling a person a Christian make him a Christ. The real Rosicrucian or Mason cannot be made. He must grow to be one by the expansion and unfoldment of the divine power within his own heart. The inattention to this truth is the cause that many churches and secret societies are far from being that which their names express. The symbolic principles of Rosicrucianism are so profound that even today they are little appreciated. Their charts and diagrams are concerned with weighty cosmic principles, which they treat with a philosophic understanding, decidedly refreshing when compared with the orthodox narrowness prevalent in their day. According to the available records, the Rosicrucians were bound together by mutual aspirations rather than by the laws of a fraternity. The Brothers of the Rose Cross are believed to have lived unobtrusively, laboring industriously in trades and professions, disclosing their secret affiliation to no one, in many cases not even to their own families. After the death of CRC, most of the brethren apparently had no central meeting place. Whatever initiatory ritual the order possessed was so closely guarded that it has never been revealed. Doubtless it was couched in chemical terminology. Efforts to join the order were apparently futile, for the Rosicrucians always chose their disciples. Having agreed on one who they believed would do honor to their illustrious fraternity, they communicated with him in one of many mysterious ways. He might receive a letter, either anonymous or with a peculiar seal, usually bearing the letters CRC or RC upon it. He would be instructed to go to a certain place at an appointed time. What was disclosed to him he never revealed, although in many cases his later writings showed that a new influence had come into his life, deepening his understanding and broadening his intellect. A few have written allegorically concerning what they beheld when in the august presence of the Brethren of the Rose Cross. Alchemists were sometimes visited in their laboratories by mysterious strangers, who delivered learned discourses concerning the secret processes of the hermetic arts, and, after disclosing certain processes, departed, leaving no trace. Others declared that the Brothers of the Rose Cross communicated with them through dreams and visions, revealing the secrets of hermetic wisdom to them while they were asleep. Having been instructed, the candidate was bound to secrecy, not only concerning the chemical formulae which had been disclosed to him, but also concerning the method by which he had secured them. While these nameless adepts were suspected of being Brothers of the Rose Cross, it could never be proved who they were, and those visited could only conjecture. Many suspect the Rosicrucian rose to be a conventionalization of the Egyptian and Hindu lotus blossom, with the same symbolic meaning as this more ancient symbol. The Divine Comedy stamps Dante Alighieri as being familiar with the theory of Rosicrucianism. Concerning this point, Albert Pike, in his Morals and Dogma, makes this significant statement. His hell is but a negative purgatory. His heaven is composed of a series of Kabbalistic circles, divided by a cross like the pentacle of Ezekiel. In the center of this cross blooms a rose, and we see the symbol of the adepts of the Rose Croix for the first time publicly expounded and almost categorically explained. Doubt has always existed as to whether the name Rosicrucian came from the symbol of the rose and cross, or whether this was merely a blind to deceive the uninformed and further conceal the true meaning of the order. Godfrey Higgins believes that the word Rosicrucian is not derived from the flower, but from the word ros, which means dew. It is also interesting to note that the word ras means wisdom, while rus is translated concealment. Doubtless all of these meanings have contributed to Rosicrucian symbolism. A. E. Waite holds with Godfrey Higgins that the process of forming the Philosopher's Stone with the aid of dew is the secret concealed within the name Rosicrucian. It is possible that the dew referred to is a mysterious substance within the human brain, closely resembling the description given by alchemists of the dew which, falling from heaven, redeemed the earth. The cross is symbolic of the human body, and the two symbols together, the rose on the cross, signify that the soul of man is crucified upon the body, where it is held by 3 nails. It is probable that Rosicrucian symbolism is a perpetuation of the secret tenets of the Egyptian Hermes, and that the Society of Unknown Philosophers is the true link connecting modern Masonry, with its massive symbols, to ancient Egyptian Hermeticism, the source of that symbolism. In his Doctrine and Literature of the Kabbalah, A. E. Waite makes this important observation. There are certain indications which point to a possible connection between Masonry and Rosicrucianism, and this, if admitted, would constitute the first link in its connection with the past. The evidence is, however, inconclusive, or at least unextricated. Freemasonry per se, in spite of the affinity with mysticism which I have just mentioned, has never exhibited any mystic character, nor has it a clear notion how it came by its symbols. Many of those connected with the development of Freemasonry were suspected of being Rosicrucians. Some, as in the case of Robert Flood, even wrote defenses of this organization. Frank C. Higgins, a modern Masonic symbolist, writes, Dr. Ash Mole, a member of this fraternity, Rosicrucian, is revered by Masons as one of the founders of the first Grand Lodge in London. See Ancient Freemasonry. Elias Ashmole is but one of the many intellectual links concerning Rosicrucianism with the genesis of Freemasonry. The Encyclopedia Britannica notes that Elias Ashmole was initiated into the Freemasonic Order in 1646. The further states that he was the first gentleman or amateur to be accepted. On this same subject, Pappas, in his Tarot of the Bohemians, has written, "We must not forget that the Rosicrucians were the initiators of Leibniz and the founders of actual Freemasonry through Ashmole. If the founders of Freemasonry were initiated into the great arcanum of Egypt, and the symbolism of modern Masonry would indicate that such was the case, then it is reasonable to suppose that they secured their information from a society whose existence they admitted and which was duly qualified to teach them these symbols and allegories. One theory concerning the two orders is to the effect that Freemasonry was an outgrowth of Rosicrucianism. In other words, that the unknown philosophers became known through an organization which they created to serve them in the material world. The story goes on to relate that the Rosicrucian adepts became dissatisfied with their progeny and silently withdrew from the Masonic hierarchy, leaving behind their symbolism and allegories, but carrying away the keys by which the locked symbols could be made to give up their secret meanings. Speculators have gone so far as to state that, in their opinion, modern Freemasonry has completely absorbed Rosicrucianism and succeeded it as the world's greatest secret society. Other minds of equal learning declare that the Rosicrucian Brotherhood still exists, preserving its individuality as the result of having withdrawn from the Masonic order. According to a widely accepted tradition, the headquarters of the Rosicrucian order is near Carlsbad, in Austria. See Dr. Franz Hartmann. Another version has it that a mysterious school resembling in general principles the Rosicrucian fraternity, which calls itself the Bohemian Brothers, still maintains its individuality in the Schwarzwald, or Black Forest, of Germany. One thing is certain, with the rise of Freemasonry, the Rosicrucian order in Europe practically disappeared, and, notwithstanding existing statements to the contrary, it is certain that the 18th degree, commonly known as the Rose Croix, perpetuates many of the symbols of the Rosicrucian fire alchemists. In an anonymous, unpublished manuscript of the 18th century bearing the earmarks of Rosicrucian Kabbalism, appears this statement: "Yet will I now give the overwise world a paradox to be solved, namely, that some illuminated men have undertaken to found schools of wisdom in Europe, and these for some peculiar reason have called themselves Fratris Rosa Crucis. But soon afterwards came false schools into existence and corrupted the good intentions of these wise men. Therefore, the order no longer exists as most people would understand existence, and as this fraternity of the Seculophili call themselves Brothers of the Rosy Cross, so also will they in the Seculo Spiritus Sancti call themselves Brothers of the Lily Cross and the Knights of the White Lion. Then will the schools of wisdom begin again to blossom, but why the first one chose their name, and why the others shall also choose theirs, only those can solve who have understanding grounded in nature." The Rosicrucian Roys, from Geheime Figuren der Rosenkreuzer. The rose is a Ionic symbol associated with generation, fecundity, and purity. The fact that flowers blossom by unfolding has caused them to be chosen as symbolic of spiritual unfoldment. The red color of the rose refers to the blood of Christ, and the golden heart concealed within the midst of the flower corresponds to the spiritual gold concealed within the human nature. The number of its petals being 10 is also a subtle reminder of the perfect Pythagorean number. The rose symbolizes the heart, and the heart has always been accepted by Christians as emblematic of the virtues of love and compassion, as well as the nature of Christ, the personification of these virtues. The rose as a religious emblem is of great antiquity. It was accepted by the Greeks as the symbol of the sunrise, or of the coming dawn. In his Metamorphosis, or Golden Ass, Apuleius turned into a donkey because of his foolishness, regained his human shape by eating a sacred rose given to him by the Egyptian priests. The presence of a hieroglyphic rose upon the escutcheon of Martin Luther has been the basis of much speculation as to whether any connection existed between his Reformation and the secret activities of the Rose Cross. Political aspirations of the Rosicrucians were expressed through the activities of Sir Francis Bacon, the Comte de Saint-Germain, and the Comte de Cagliostro. The last named is suspected of having been an emissary of the Knights Templars, a society deeply involved in transcendentalism, as Eliphas Levi has noted. There is a popular supposition to the effect that the Rosicrucians were at least partial instigators of the French Revolution. Note particularly the introduction to Lord Bulwer Lytton's Rosicrucian novel, Zanoni. The third postulate. The third theory takes the form of a sweeping denial of Rosicrucianism, asserting that the so-called original order never had any foundation in fact, but was entirely a product of imagination. This viewpoint is best expressed by a number of questions which are still being asked by investigators of this elusive group of metaphysicians. Was the Brotherhood of the Rose Cross merely a mythical institution created in the fertile mind of some literary cynic for the purpose of deriding the alchemical and hermetic sciences? Did the House of the Holy Spirit ever exist outside the imagination of some medieval mystic? Was the whole Rosicrucian story a satire to ridicule the gullibility of scholastic Europe? Was the mysterious Father CRC a product of the literary genius of Johann Valentin Andrei, or another of similar mind, who, attempting to score alchemical and hermetic philosophy, unwittingly became a great power in furthering the cause of its promulgation? That at least one of the early documents of the Rosicrucians was from the pen of Andrei, there is little doubt, but for just what purpose he compiled it still remains a matter of speculation. Did Andrei himself receive from some unknown person or persons instructions to be carried out? If he wrote the chemical nuptials of Christian Rosenkreutz when only 15 years old, was he overshadowed in the preparation of that book? To these vital questions no answers are forthcoming. A number of persons accepted the magnificent imposture of Andrei as absolute truth. It is maintained by many that, as a consequence, numerous pseudo-societies sprang up, each asserting that it was the organization concerning which the Fama Fraternitatis and the Confessio Fraternitatis were written. Beyond doubt, there are many spurious orders in existence today, but few of them can offer valid claims that their history dates back farther than the beginning of the 19th century. The mystery associated with the Rosicrucian fraternity has resulted in endless controversy. Many able minds, notable among them Eugenius Philalethes, Michael Mayer, John Hayden, and Robert Flood, defended the concrete existence of the Society of Unknown Philosophers. Others, equally qualified, have asserted it to be of fraudulent origin and doubtful existence. Eugenius Philalethes, while dedicating books to the order and himself writing an extended exposition of its principles, disclaims all personal connection with it. Many others have done likewise. Some are of the opinion that Sir Francis Bacon had a hand in writing of the Fama and Confessio Fraternitatis, on the basis that the rhetorical style of these works is similar to that of Bacon's New Atlantis. They also contend that certain statements in the latter work point to an acquaintance with Rosicrucian symbology. The elusiveness of the Rosicrucians has caused them to be favorite subjects for literary works. Outstanding among the romances which have been woven around them is Zanoni. The author, Lord Bulwer-Lytton, is regarded by some as a member of the order, while others assert that he applied for membership but was rejected. Pope's Rape of the Lock and Comte de Gabalis by Abbé de Villars and essays by De Quincey, Hartman, Jennings, Mackenzie, and others are examples of Rosicrucian literature. Although the existence of these medieval Rosicrucians is difficult to prove, sufficient evidence is at hand to make it extremely probable that there existed in Germany and afterwards in France, Italy, England, and other European countries a secret society of illuminated servants who made contributions of great import to the sum of human knowledge, while maintaining absolute secrecy concerning their personalities and their organization. The fourth postulate. The apparent incongruities of the Rosicrucian controversy have also been accounted for by a purely transcendental explanation. There is evidence that early writers were acquainted with such supposition, which, however, was popularized only after it had been espoused by Theosophy. This theory asserts that the Rosicrucians actually possessed all these supernatural powers with which they were credited, that they were, in reality, citizens of two worlds, that, while they had physical bodies for expression on the material plane, they were also capable, through the instructions they received from the Brotherhood, of functioning in a mysterious ethereal body, not subject to the limitations of time or distance. By means of this astral form, they were able to function in the invisible realm of nature, and in this realm, beyond reach of the profane, their temple was located. According to this viewpoint, the true Rosicrucian Brotherhood consisted of a limited number of highly developed adepts, or initiates, those of the higher degrees being no longer subject to the laws of mortality. Candidates were accepted into the order only after long periods of probation. Adepts possessed the secret of the Philosopher's Stone and knew the process of transmuting the base metals into gold, but taught that these were only allegorical terms concealing the true mystery of human regeneration through the transmutation of the base metals of man's lower nature into the gold of intellectual and spiritual realization. According to this theory, Those who have sought to record the events of importance in connection with the Rosicrucian controversy have invariably failed because they approached their subject from a purely physical or materialistic angle. These adepts were believed to have been able to teach man how to function away from his physical body at will by assisting him to remove the rose from the cross. They taught that the spiritual nature was attached to the material form at certain points, symbolized by the nails of the crucifixion, but by 3 alchemical initiations which took place in the spiritual world, in the true temple of the Rose Cross, they were able to draw these nails and permit the divine nature of man to come down from its cross. They concealed the processes by which this was accomplished under 3 alchemical metaphoric expressions: the casting of the molten sea, the making of the rose diamond, and the achieving of the philosopher's stone. While the intellectualist flounders among contradictory theories, the mystic treats the problem in an entirely different manner. He believes that the true Rosicrucian fraternity, consisting of a school of supermen, not unlike the fabled Mahatmas of India, is an institution existing not in the visible world, but in its spiritual counterpart, which he sees fit to call the inner planes of nature. That the brothers can be reached only by those who are capable of transcending the limitations of the material world. To substantiate their viewpoint, these mystics cite the following significant statement from the Confessio Fraternitatis: 1,000 times the unworthy may clamor, 1,000 times may present themselves, yet God hath commanded our ears that they should hear none of them, and hath so compassed us about with his clouds, that unto us, his servants, no violence can be done. Wherefore, now no longer are we beheld by human eyes, unless they have received strength borrowed from the eagle. In mysticism, the eagle is a symbol of initiation, the spinal spirit fire, and by this is explained the inability of the unregenerated world to understand the secret order of the Rose Cross. The crest of Johann Valentin Andrei from Chemisch Hochzeit. The reference to 4 red roses and a white cross in the chemical marriage of Christian Rosenkreuz identified Johann Valentin Andrei as its author, for his family crest, shown above, consisted of 4 red roses and a white cross. Those professing this theory regard the Comte de Saint-Germain as their highest adept and assert that he and Christian Rosenkreuz were one and the same individual. They accept fire as their universal symbol because it was the one element by means of which they could control the metals. They declare themselves the descendants of Tubal-Cain and Hiram Abiff, and that the purpose of their existence was to preserve the spiritual nature of man through the ages of materiality. The Gnostic sects, the Arabs, alchemists, Templars, Rosicrucians, and lastly the Freemasons, form the Western chain in the transmission of occult science. See The Tarot of the Bohemians, translated by A.E. Waite from the French of Papus. Max Heindel, the Christian mystic, described the Rosicrucian temple as an etheric structure located in and around the home of a European country gentleman. He believed that this invisible building would ultimately be moved to the American continent. Mr. Heindel referred to the Rosicrucian initiates as so advanced in the science of life that death had forgotten them. Rosicrucian doctrines and tenets. Trustworthy information is unavailable concerning the actual philosophical beliefs, political aspirations, and humanitarian activities of the Rosicrucian fraternity. Today, as of old, the mysteries of the society are preserved inviolate by virtue of their essential nature, and attempts to interpret Rosicrucian philosophy are but speculations, anything to the contrary notwithstanding. Evidence points to the probable existence of 2 distinct Rosicrucian bodies, an inner organization whose members never revealed their identity or teachings to the world, and an outer body under the supervision of the inner group. In all probability, the symbolic tomb of Christian Rosenkreuz, Knight of the Golden Stone, was in reality this outer body, the spirit of which is in a more exalted sphere. For a period of more than a century subsequent to 1614, the outer body circulated tracts and manifestos under either its own name or the names of various initiated members. The purpose of these writings was apparently to confuse and mislead investigators, and thus effectively to conceal the actual designs of the fraternity. When Rosicrucianism became the philosophical fad of the 17th century, numerous documents on the subject were also circulated for purely commercial purposes by impostors desirous of capitalizing its popularity. The cunningly contrived artifices of the fraternity itself and the blundering literary impostures of charlatans formed a double veil behind which the inner organization carried on its activities in a manner totally dissimilar to its purposes and principles as publicly disseminated. The Fratres Rosicrucis naively refer to the misunderstandings which they have, for obvious reasons, permitted to exist concerning themselves as being clouds within which they labor and behind which they are concealed. An inkling of the substance of Rosicrucianism, its esoteric doctrines, can be gleaned from an analysis of its shadow, its exoteric writings. In one of the most important of their clouds, the Confessio Fraternitatis, the Brethren of the Fraternity of R.C., seek to justify their existence and explain the purposes and activities of their order. In its original form, the Confessio is divided into 14 chapters, which are here epitomized. Confessio Fraternitatis R.C. ad Eruditos Europae. Chapter 1. Do not through hasty judgment or prejudice misinterpret the statements concerning our fraternity published in our previous manifesto, the Fama Fraternitatis. Jehovah, beholding the decadence of civilization, seeks to redeem humanity by revealing to the willing and by thrusting upon the reluctant those secrets which previously he had reserved for his elect. By this wisdom the godly shall be saved, but the sorrows of the ungodly shall be multiplied. While the true purpose of our order was set forth in the Fama Fraternitatis, misunderstandings have arisen, through which we have been falsely accused of heresy and treason. In this document, we hope to clarify our position that the learned of Europe will be moved to join with us in the dissemination of divine knowledge, according to the will of our illustrious founder. Chapter 2. While it is alleged by many that the philosophic side of our day is sound, we declare it to be false and soon to die of its own inherent weakness. Just as nature, however, provides a remedy for each new disease that manifests itself, so our fraternity has provided a remedy for the infirmities of the world's philosophic system. The secret philosophy of the R.C. is founded upon that knowledge which is the sum and head of all faculties, sciences, and arts. By our divinely revealed system, which partakes much of theology and medicine, but little of jurisprudence, we analyze the heavens and the earth, but mostly we study man himself, within whose nature is concealed the supreme elect. If the learned of our day will accept our invitation and join themselves to our fraternity, we will reveal to them the undreamed of secrets and wonders concerning the hidden workings of nature. Chapter 3. Do not believe that the secrets discussed in this brief document are lightly esteemed by us. We cannot describe fully the marvels of our fraternity, lest the uninformed be overwhelmed by our astonishing declarations, and the vulgar ridicule the mysteries which they do not comprehend. We also fear that many will be confused by the unexpected generosity of our proclamation, for, not understanding the wonders of this sixth age, they do not realize the great changes which are to come. Like blind men living in a world full of light, they discern only through the sense of feeling. By sight is implied spiritual cognition, by feeling the material senses. Chapter 4. We firmly believe that through deep meditation on the inventions of the human mind and the mysteries of life, through the cooperation of the angels and spirits, and through experience and long observation, our loving Christian Father, C.R.C., was so fully illumined with God's wisdom that were all the books and writings of the world lost and the foundations of science overturned, the fraternity of R.C. could reestablish the structure of the world thought upon the foundation of divine truth and integrity. Because of the great depth and perfection of our knowledge, those desiring to understand the mysteries of the fraternity of R.C. cannot attain to that wisdom immediately, but must grow in understanding and knowledge. Therefore, our fraternity is divided into grades, through which each must ascend step by step to the great arcanum. Now that it has pleased God to lighten unto us his sixth candelabrum, is it not better to seek truth in this way than to wander through the labyrinths of worldly ignorance? Furthermore, those who receive this knowledge shall become masters of all arts and crafts. No secret shall be hidden from them, and all good works of the past, present, and future shall be accessible to them. The whole world shall become as one book, and the contradictions of science and theology shall be reconciled. Rejoice, O humanity, for the time has come when God has decreed that the number of our fraternity shall be increased, a labor that we have joyously undertaken. The doors of wisdom are now open to the world, but only to those who have earned the privilege. May the brothers present themselves, for it is forbidden to reveal our knowledge even to our own children. The right to receive spiritual truth cannot be inherited. It must be evolved within the soul of man himself. Chapter 5. Though we may be accused of indiscretion in offering our treasures so freely and promiscuously, without discriminating between the godly, the wise, the prince, the peasant, we affirm that we have not betrayed our trust, for although we have published our fama in 5 languages, only those understand it who have that right. Our society is not to be discovered by curiosity seekers, but only by serious and consecrated thinkers. Nevertheless, we have circulated our fama in 5 mother tongues, so that the righteous of all nations may have an opportunity to know of us, even though they be not scholars. 1,000 times the unworthy may present themselves and clamor at the gates, but God has forbidden us of the fraternity of R.C. to hear their voices, and He has surrounded us with His clouds and His protection, so that no harm may come to us, and God has decreed that we of the order of R.C. can no longer be seen by mortal eyes unless they have received strength borrowed from the eagle. We further affirm that we shall reform the governments of Europe and pattern them according to the system applied by the philosophers of Damkar. All men, desirous of securing knowledge, shall receive as much as they are capable of understanding. The rule of false theology shall be overthrown, and God shall make His will known through His chosen philosophers. Chapter 6. Because of the need of brevity, it is enough to say that our father, CRC, was born in the year 1378 and departed at the age of 106, leaving to us the labor of spreading the doctrine of philosophic religion to the entire world. Our fraternity is open to all who sincerely seek for truth, but we publicly warn the false and impious that they cannot betray or injure us, for God has protected our fraternity, and all who seek to do it harm shall have their evil designs return and destroy them, while the treasures of our fraternity shall remain untouched, to be used by the Lion in the establishment of His kingdom. Chapter 7. We declare that God, before the end of the world, shall create a great flood of spiritual light to alleviate the sufferings of mankind. Falsehood and darkness, which have crept into the arts, sciences, religions, and governments of humanity, making it difficult for even the wise to discover the path of reality, shall be forever removed and a single standard established, so that all may enjoy the fruitage of truth. We shall not be recognized as those responsible for this change, for people shall say that it is the result of the progressiveness of the age. Great are the reforms about to take place, but we of the fraternity of R.C. do not arrogate to ourselves the glory for this divine reformation, since many there are, not members of our fraternity, but honest, true, and wise men, who by their intelligence and their writings shall hasten its coming. We testify that sooner the stones shall rise up and offer their services than there shall be any lack of righteous persons to execute the will of God upon earth. Chapter 8. That no one may doubt, we declare that God has sent messengers and signs in the heavens, namely, the new stars in Serpentarius and Cygnus, to show that a great council of the elect is to take place. This proves that God reveals invisible nature, for the discerning few, signs and symbols of all things that are coming to pass. God has given man 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, and 2 ears, but only 1 tongue. Whereas the eyes, the nostrils, and the ears admit the wisdom of nature into the mind, the tongue alone may give it forth. In various ages there have been illumined ones who have seen, smelt, tasted, or heard the will of God, but it will shortly come to pass that those who have seen, smelt, tasted, or heard shall speak, and truth shall be revealed. Before this revelation of righteousness is possible, however, the world must sleep away the intoxication of her poisoned chalice, filled with the false life of the theological vine, and, opening her heart to virtue and understanding, welcome the rising sun of truth. Chapter 9. We have a magic writing, copied from that divine alphabet with which God writes His will upon the face of celestial and terrestrial nature. With this new language, we read God's will for all His creatures, and just as astronomers predict eclipses, so we prognosticate the obscurations of the Church and how long they shall last. Our language is like unto that of Adam and Enoch before the fall, and though we understand and can explain our mysteries in this, our sacred language, we cannot do so in Latin, a tongue contaminated by the confusion of Babylon. Chapter 10. Although there are still certain powerful persons who oppose and hinder us, because of which we must remain concealed, we exhort those who would become of our fraternity to study unceasingly the sacred scriptures, for such as do this cannot be far from us. We do not mean that the Bible should be continually in the mouth of man, but that he should search for its true and eternal meaning, which is seldom discovered by theologians, scientists, or mathematicians, because they are blinded by the opinions of their sects. We bear witness that never since the beginning of the world has there been given to man a more excellent book than the Holy Bible. Blessed is he who possesses it, more blessed he who reads it, most blessed he who understands it, and most godlike he who obeys it. Chapter 11. We wish the statements we made in the Fama Fraternitatis concerning the transmutation of metals and the universal medicine to be lightly understood. While we realize that both these works are attainable by man, we fear that many really great minds may be led away from the true quest of knowledge and understanding if they permit themselves to limit their investigation to the transmutation of metals. When to a man is given power to heal disease, to overcome poverty, and to reach a position of worldly dignity, that man is beset by numerous temptations, and unless he possess true knowledge and full understanding, he will become a terrible menace to mankind. The alchemist who attains to the art of transmuting base metals can do all manner of evil unless his understanding be as great as his self-created wealth. We therefore affirm that man must first gain knowledge, virtue, and understanding. Then all other things may be added unto him. We accuse the Christian Church of the great sin of possessing power and using it unwisely. Therefore we prophesy that it shall fall by the weight of its own iniquities, and its crown shall be brought to naught. Chapter 12. In concluding our Confessio, we earnestly admonish you to cast aside the worthless books of pseudo-alchemists and philosophers, of whom there are many in our age, who make light of the Holy Trinity and deceive the credulous with meaningless enigmas. One of the greatest of these is a stage player, a man with sufficient ingenuity for imposition. Such men are mingled by the enemy of human welfare among those who seek to do good, thus making truth more difficult of discovery. Believe us, truth is simple and unconcealed, while falsehood is complex, deeply hidden, proud, and its fictitious worldly knowledge, seemingly aglitter with godly luster, is often mistaken for divine wisdom. You, that are wise, will turn from these false teachings and come to us, who seek not your money, but freely offer you our greatest treasure. We desire not your goods, but that you should become partakers of our goods. We do not deride parables, but invite you to understand all parables and secrets. We do not ask you to receive us, but invite you to come unto our kingly houses and palaces, not because of ourselves, but because we are so ordered by the Spirit of God, the desire of our most excellent Father, CRC, and the need of the present moment, which is very great. Chapter 13. Now that we have made our position clear that we sincerely confess Christ, disavow the papacy, devote our lives to the true philosophy and worthy living, and daily invite and admit into our fraternity the worthy of all nations, who thereafter share with us the light of God, will you not join yourselves with us to the perfection of yourselves, the development of all the arts, and the service of the world? If you will take this step, the treasures of every part of the earth shall be at one time given unto you, and the darkness which envelops human knowledge and which results in the vanities of material arts and sciences shall be forever dispelled. Chapter 14. Again, we warn those who are dazzled by the glitter of gold, or those who, now upright, might be turned by great riches to a life of idleness and pomp, not to disturb our sacred silence with their clamorings. For though there be a medicine which will cure all diseases and give unto all men wisdom, yet it is against the will of God that men should attain to understanding by any means other than virtue, labor, and integrity. We are not permitted to manifest ourselves to any man except it be by the will of God. Those who believe that they can partake of our spiritual wealth against the will of God or without his sanction will find that they shall sooner lose their lives in seeking us than attain happiness by finding us. Fraternitatis, R.C. Johann Valentin Andrei is generally reputed to be the author of the Confessio. It is a much mooted question, however, whether Andrei did not permit his name to be used as a pseudonym by Sir Francis Bacon. Apropos of this subject are two extremely significant references occurring in the introduction to that remarkable potpourri, The Anatomy of Melancholy. This volume first appeared in 1621 from the pen of Democritus Jr., who was afterwards identified as Robert Burton, who in turn was a suspected intimate of Sir Francis Bacon. One reference archly suggests that at the time of publishing The Anatomy of Melancholy in 1621, the founder of the fraternity of R.C. was still alive. This statement, concealed from general recognition by its textual involvement, has escaped the notice of most students of Rosicrucianism. In the same work there also appears a short footnote of stupendous import. It contains merely the words Job, Valent, Andreas, Lord Verulam. This single line definitely relates Johann Valentin Andrei to Sir Francis Bacon, who was Lord Verulam, and, by its punctuation, intimates that they are one and the same individual. Johann Valentin Andrei, from a rare print. In certain esoteric circles there are vague rumors which intimate that the humble personality of Johann Valentin Andrei masked an exalted emissary of the Rose Cross, while there is sufficient evidence at hand to establish the actual existence of a German theologian by the name of Andrei. There are many discrepancies in his biography which have not been cleared up to the satisfaction of critical investigators. A comparison of the face shown above with that of Sir Francis Bacon discloses striking resemblances in spite of the differences due to age. If Lord Bacon borrowed the name and identity of William Shakespeare, he could also assume, after his mock funeral in England, the personality of Johann Valentin Andrei. The crescent below the bust is significant, as it also appears upon the crest of Lord Bacon, to denote that he was the second son of Sir Nicholas Bacon. Further, the 4 letters, OMDC, in the frame at the lower right corner of the plate by a very simple Baconian cipher, can be changed into a number whose sum gives 33, the numerical equivalent of the name Bacon. These several points of interest, when considered together, go far towards clearing up the mystery surrounding the authorship of the first Rosicrucian manifestos. Prominent among Rosicrucian apologists was John Hayden, who inscribes himself a servant of God and a secretary of nature. In his curious work, The Rosy Cross Uncovered, he gives an enigmatic but valuable description of the fraternity of R.C. in the following language. Now there are a kind of men, as they themselves report, named Rosicrucians, a divine fraternity that inhabit the suburbs of heaven, and these are the officers of the Generalissimo of the world, that are as the eyes and ears of the great king, seeing and hearing all things. They say these Rosicrucians are seraphically illuminated, as Moses was, according to this order of the elements, earth refined to water, water to air, air to fire. A symbolic diagram of the operations of nature, from Flood's Collectio Operum. This plate, engraved by de Bry, is the most famous of the diagrams illustrating the philosophic principles of Robert Flood. Robertus de Fluctibus. 3 figures are outstanding links between Rosicrucianism and Freemasonry: Michael Mayer, Elias Ashmole, and Robert Flood. De Quincey considers Robert Flood to be the immediate father of Freemasonry. See the Rosicrucians and Freemasons. Edward Waite considers Robert Flood as second to none of the disciples of Paracelsus, even going as far as to declare that Flood far surpassed his master. He further adds, the central figure of Rosicrucian literature, towering as an intellectual giant above the crowd of souffleurs, theosophists, and charlatanic professors of the magnum opus, who, directly or otherwise, were connected with the mysterious brotherhood, is Robertus de Fluctibus, the great English mystical philosopher of the 17th century, a man of immense erudition, of exalted mind, and, to judge by his writings, of extreme personal sanctity. See The Real History of the Rosicrucians. Robert Flood was born in 1574 and died in 1637. The de Bry diagram shown above is almost self-explanatory. Outside the circle of the starry heavens are the 3 fiery rings of the Imperium, the triple fire of the Supreme Creator, in which dwell the celestial creatures. Within the realms of the stars are the circles of the planets and elements. After the element of air comes the circle of the world, Earth. The circle of animals is followed by the circle of plants, which, in turn, is followed by the circle of the minerals. Then come various industries, and in the center is a terrestrial globe with an ape-man sitting upon it, measuring a sphere with a pair of compasses. This little figure represents the animal creation. In the outer ring of fire, Above is the sacred name of Jehovah surrounded by clouds. From these clouds issues a hand holding a chain. Between the divine sphere and the lower world personified by the ape is the figure of a woman. It is to be specially noted that the female figure is merely holding the chain connecting her with the lower world, but the chain connecting her with the higher world ends in a shackle about her wrist. This female figure is capable of several interpretations. She may represent humanity suspended between divinity and the beast. She may represent nature as the link between God and the lower world, or she may represent the human soul, the common denominator between the superior and the inferior. He further declares that these mysterious brethren possessed polymorphous powers, appearing in any desired form at will. In the preface of the same work, he enumerates the strange powers of the Rosicrucian adepts. I shall here tell you what Rosicrucians are, and that Moses was their father, and he was God's son. Some say they were the order of Elias, some say the disciples of Ezekiel. For it should seem Rosicrucians were not only initiated into the Mosaical theory, but have arrived also to the power of working miracles, as Moses, Elias, Ezekiel, and the succeeding prophets did, as being transported where they please, as Habakkuk was from Jewry to Babylon, or as Philip after he had baptized the eunuch to Azores, and one of these went from me to a friend of mine in Devonshire, and came and brought me an answer to London the same day, which is 4 days' journey. They caught me excellent predictions of astrology and earthquakes. They slacked the plague in cities. They silenced the violent winds and tempests. They calm the rage of the sea and rivers. They walk in the air. They frustrate the malicious aspects of witches. They cure all diseases. The writings of John Hayden are considered a most important contribution to Rosicrucian literature. John Hayden was probably related to Sir Christopher Hayden, a seraphically illuminated Rosicrucian, whom the late F. Leigh Gardiner, Honorable Secretary in Anglia, believes to have been the source of his Rosicrucian knowledge. In his Bibliotheca Rosicruciana, he makes the following statement concerning John Hayden. On the whole, from internal evidence of his writings, he appears to have gone through the lower grades of the R.C. order and to have given out much of this to the world. John Hayden traveled extensively, visiting Arabia, Egypt, Persia, and various parts of Europe, as related in a biographical introduction to his work, The Wise Man's Crown, Set with Angels, Planets, Metals, etc., or The Glory of the Rosy Cross, a work declared by him to be a translation into English of the mysterious book M, brought from Arabia by Christian Rosenkreutz. Thomas Vaughan, Eugenius Philalethes, another companion of the order, corroborates the statement of John Hayden concerning the ability of the Rosicrucian initiates to make themselves invisible at will. The fraternity of R.C. can move in this white mist. Whosoever would communicate with us must be able to see in this light, or thus he will never see unless by our own will. The fraternity of R.C. is an august and sovereign body, arbitrarily manipulating the symbols of alchemy, Kabbalism, astrology, and magic to the attainment of its own peculiar purposes, but entirely independent of the cults whose terminology it employs. The three major objects of the fraternity are: 1. The abolition of all monarchical forms of government, and the substitution, therefore, of the rulership of the philosophic elect. The present democracies are the direct outgrowth of Rosicrucian efforts to liberate the Moors from the domination of despotism. In the early part of the 18th century, the Rosicrucians turned their attention to the new American colonies, then forming the nucleus of a great nation in the New World. The American War of Independence represents their first great political experiment and resulted in the establishment of a national government founded upon the fundamental principles of divine and natural law. As an imperishable reminder of their sub rosa activities, the Rosicrucians left the Great Seal of the United States. The Rosicrucians were also the instigators of the French Revolution, but in this instance were not wholly successful, owing to the fact that the fanaticism of the revolutionists could not be controlled and the reign of terror ensued. 2. The reformation of science, philosophy, and ethics. The Rosicrucians declared that the material arts and sciences were but shadows of the divine wisdom, and that only by penetrating the innermost recesses of nature could man attain to reality and understanding. Though calling themselves Christians, the Rosicrucians were evidently Platonists and also profoundly versed in the deepest mysteries of early Hebrew and Hindu theology. There is undeniable evidence that the Rosicrucians desired to reestablish the institutions of the ancient mysteries as the foremost method of instructing humanity in the secret and eternal doctrine. Indeed, being in all probability the perpetuators of the ancient mysteries, the Rosicrucians were able to maintain themselves against the obliterating forces of dogmatic Christianity only by absolute secrecy and the subtlety of their subterfuges. They so carefully regarded and preserved the supreme mystery, the identity and interrelationship of the three selves, that no one, to whom they did not of their own accord reveal themselves, has ever secured any satisfactory information regarding either the existence or the purpose of the order. The fraternity of R.C., through its outer organization, is gradually creating an environment or body in which the illustrious brother C.R.C. may ultimately incarnate and consummate for humanity the vast spiritual and material labors of the fraternity. The Alchemical Androgyne, from the Turbe Philosophorum. The Turbe Philosophorum is one of the earliest known documents on alchemy in the Latin tongue. Its exact origin is unknown. It is sometimes referred to as the Third Pythagorical Synod. As its name implies, it is an assembly of the sages, and sets forth the alchemical viewpoints of many of the early Greek philosophers. The symbol reproduced above is from a rare edition of the Turbe Philosophorum, published in Germany in 1750, and represents by a hermaphroditic figure the accomplishment of the magnum opus. The active and passive principles of nature were often depicted by male and female figures, and when these two principles were harmoniously conjoined in any one nature or body, it was customary to symbolize this state of perfect equilibrium by the composite figure shown above. 3. The discovery of the universal medicine, or panacea, for all forms of disease. There is ample evidence that the Rosicrucians were successful in their quest for the elixir of life. In this Theatrum Chemicum Britannicum, Elias Ashmole states that the Rosicrucians were not appreciated in England, but were welcomed on the continent. He also states that Queen Elizabeth was twice cured of the smallpox by the Brethren of the Rosy Cross, and that the Earl of Norfolk was healed of leprosy by a Rosicrucian physician. In the quotations that follow, it is hinted by John Hayden that the brothers of the fraternity possessed the secret of prolonging human existence indefinitely, but not beyond the time appointed by the will of God. And at last they could restore by the same course every brother that died to life again, and so continue many ages. The rules you find in the 4th book. After this manner began the fraternity of the Rosy Cross, first by 4 persons, who died and rose again until Christ, and then they came to worship as the star guided them to Bethlehem of Judea, where lay our Savior in his mother's arms, and then they opened their treasure and presented unto him gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, and by the commandment of God went home to their habitation. These 4, waxing young again successively, many hundreds of years, made a magical language and writing, with a large dictionary, which we yet daily use to God's praise and glory, and do find great wisdom therein. Now, whilst Brother C.R. was in a proper womb quickening, they concluded to draw and receive yet others more into their fraternity. A Rosicrucian title page, from Myers, Viatorium. Count Michael Mayer, physician to Rudolph II, was an outstanding figure in the Rosicrucian controversy. There is little doubt that he was an initiated member of the Rosicrucian fraternity, empowered by the order to promulgate its secrets among the philosophic elect of Europe. The above title page shows the 7 planets represented by appropriate figures. Behind the central figure in each case is a smaller emblem, signifying the zodiacal sign in which the planet is enthroned. In the arch over the title itself is a portrait of the learned Mayer. The volume of which this is the title page is devoted to an analysis of the nature and effect of the 7 planets, and is couched in alchemical terminology throughout. Michael Mayer concealed his knowledge so cunningly that it is exceedingly difficult to track from his writings the secrets which he possessed. He was profuse in his use of emblems, and the greater part of his philosophical lore is concealed in the engravings which illustrate his books. The womb herein referred to was apparently the glass casket or container in which the brothers were buried. This was also called the philosophical egg. After a certain period of time, the philosopher, breaking the shell of his egg, came forth and functioned for a prescribed period. After a certain period of time, the philosopher, breaking the shell of his egg, came forth and functioned for a prescribed period. after which he retired again into his shell of glass. The Rosicrucian medicine for the healing of all human infirmities may be interpreted either as a chemical substance which produces the physical effects described, or as a spiritual understanding, the true healing power which, when a man has partaken of it, reveals truth to him. Ignorance is the worst form of disease, and that which heals ignorance is therefore the most potent of all medicines. The perfect Rosicrucian medicine was for the healing of nations, races, and individuals. In an early unpublished manuscript, an unknown philosopher declares alchemy, Kabbalism, astrology, and magic to have been divine sciences originally, but that, through perversion, they had become false doctrines, leading seekers after wisdom ever farther from their goal. The same author gives a valuable key to esoteric Rosicrucianism by dividing the path of spiritual attainment into 3 steps, or schools, which he calls mountains. The first and lowest of these mountains is Mount Sophia, the second, Mount Kabbalah, and the third, Mount Magia. These 3 mountains are sequential stages of spiritual growth. The unknown author then states, by philosophy is to be understood the knowledge of the workings of nature, by which knowledge man learns to climb to those higher mountains above the limitations of sense. By Kabbalism is to be understood the language of the angelic or celestial beings, and he who masters it is able to converse with the messengers of God. On the highest of the mountains is the school of Magia, divine magic, which is the language of God, wherein man is taught the true nature of all things by God himself. There is a growing conviction that if the true nature of Rosicrucianism were divulged, it would cause consternation, to say the least. Rosicrucian symbols have many meanings, but the Rosicrucian meaning has not yet been revealed. The mount upon which stands the house of the Rosy Cross is still concealed by clouds, in which the brethren hide both themselves and their secrets. Michael Mayer writes, what is contained in the Fama and Confessio is true. It is a very childish objection that the brotherhood have promised so much and performed so little. With them, as elsewhere, many are called but few are chosen. The masters of the order hold out the rose as the remote prize, but they impose the cross on those who are entering. See Silentium Post Clamores by Mayer and the Rosicrucians and the Freemasons by De Quincey. The rose and the cross appear upon the stained glass windows of Lichfield Chapter House, where Walter Conrad Ironsburg believes Lord Bacon and his mother to have been buried. A crucified rose within a heart is watermarked into the dedication page of the 1628 edition of Robert Burton's Anatomy of Melancholy. The Elementary World, from Museum Hermeticum Reformatum et Amplificatum. The outer circle contains the figures of the zodiac, the second, their signs and that part of the human body which they rule, the third, the months of the year, with brief notes concerning temperaments, etc. The fourth circle contains the elements accompanied by their appropriate symbols, and the following 7 circles mark the orbits of the planets. Also the planetary angels, the 7 major members of the universal man, and the 7 metals, each division appearing under its appropriate element according to the elemental names in the 4th circle. In the 12th circle appear the words, there are 3 principles, 3 worlds, 3 ages, and 3 kingdoms. In the 13th circle appear the names of the 12 arts and sciences which are considered essential to spiritual growth. In the 14th circle is the word nature. The 15th circle contains the following words, it is the great honor of faithful souls that from their very birth an angel is appointed to preserve and keep each of them. See First English Translation, London, 1893. The fundamental symbols of the Rosicrucians were the rose and the cross, the rose female and the cross male, both universal phallic emblems. While such learned gentlemen as Thomas Inman, Hargrave Jennings, and Richard Payne Knight have truly observed that the rose and the cross typify the generative processes, these scholars seem unable to pierce the veil of symbolism. They do not realize that the creative mystery in the material world is merely a shadow of the divine creative mystery in the spiritual world. Because of the phallic significance of their symbols, both the Rosicrucians and the Templars have been falsely accused of practicing obscene rites in their secret ceremonials. While it is quite true that the alchemical retort symbolizes the womb, it also has a far more significant meaning concealed under the allegory of the second birth. As generation is the key to material existence, it is natural that the fraternity of RC should adopt as its characteristic symbols those exemplifying the reproductive processes. As regeneration is the key to spiritual existence, they therefore founded their symbolisms upon the rose and the cross, which typify the redemption of man through the union of his lower temporal nature with his higher eternal nature. The rosy cross is also a hieroglyphic figure representing the formula of the universal medicine. 15. Rosicrucian and Kabbalistic diagrams. In his well-known work, The Rosicrucians, Their Rites and Mysteries, Hargrave Jennings reproduces 5 Kabbalistic charts, which he declares to be genuine Rosicrucian drawings. He gives no information concerning their origin, nor does he attempt an elucidation of their symbolism. A recent writer who reproduced one of these charts correlated it to the emblematic tomb of Father CRC, thus exposing the true nature of Christian Rosenkreuz. The 5 plates reproduced in Hargrave Jennings' book are part of a series of 15 diagrams which appear in the magical, Kabbalistical, and theosophical writings of Georgius von Welling on the subject of salt, sulfur, and mercury. This extremely rare volume was published at Frankfurt and Leipzig in 1735 and 1760. The numbers and figures on the charts refer to the chapters and sections of the writings. These 15 charts constitute a remarkable and invaluable addition to the few other known admittedly authentic Kabbalistic and Rosicrucian diagrams. Lucifer is the greatest mystery of symbolism. The secret knowledge of the Rosicrucians concerning Lucifer is nowhere so plainly set forth as in these plates, which virtually reveal his true identity, a carefully guarded secret about which little has been written. Lucifer is represented by the number 741. Von Welling does not give a complete exposition of the 15 charts. To have done so would have been contrary to the principles of Kabbalistic philosophy. The deeper significance of the symbols is revealed only by profound study and contemplation. Table 1. Figures 1 through 11. Figure 1 is a Ptolemaic chart showing the true relationship existing between the primordial elements. Its secret significance is as follows. The outer ring enclosed by the lines A and B is the region of Shemaim, a Kabbalistic name for the supreme deity, signifying the expanse of the heavens or a spiritual fiery water. Shemaim is the ocean of spirit, within which all created and uncreated things exist, and by the life of which they are animated. In the lower worlds, Shemaim becomes the astral light. The space between B and C marks the orbits or planes of the 7 spiritual intelligences, called the divine planets, not the visible planets. According to the mysteries, the souls of men enter the lower worlds through Ring B, the fixed stars. All creation reflects the glory of Shemaim, the energy that filters into the spheres of the elements through the windows of the stars and planets. Between C and D lies the region of the subtle, spiritual air, a subdivision of ether. D to E marks the surface of the earth and sea, by which are also meant grades of ether. E to F marks the lower region, called the gathering of the waters and the production of the virgin earth, or Aries. The alchemists called this quicksand, the true mystic foundation of the solid earth. F to G marks the circle of the subterranean air, which is more dense and coarse than that in the outer space. C to D. In this denser atmosphere, the stellar influences and celestial impulses are crystallized into corporeal spirits, thus forming the multitude of forms which exist without knowledge of their own fiery source. G is the region of the central fire of the element earth, a coarse fire in contradistinction to the divine fiery Shemaim. The sphere of the starry heavens likewise has its opposite in the sphere of the subterranean air, and the sphere of the upper air, or subtle vaporous water, has its opposite in the sphere E to F. The focal point, D to E, between the 3 higher and the 3 lower spheres is called the reservoir. It receives impressions from both the superior and the inferior regions and is common to both. Figure 2 is the Kabbalistic symbol of elemental water. Figure 9 represents the spiritual invisible water. Figure 3 is the Kabbalistic symbol of elemental air. Figure 7 represents the spiritual and invisible air. Figure 4 is the Kabbalistic sign of the elemental earth. Figure 8 represents the spiritual and invisible earth. Figure 5 is the Kabbalistic sign of the elemental fire. Figure 6 represents the spiritual and invisible fire. Figures 6, 7, 8, and 9 symbolize the 4 elements before the descent of Lucifer. They are the four rivers spoken of in Genesis, having their source in the one river, figure W, which represents the elements superimposed on one another. The golden ball in the center is Shemayim, the fiery source of all elements. Figure 11 is the emblem of the beginning and the end of all creatures. From it, all things proceed, and to it all must return again to become one with the fiery water of divine understanding. Table 2, Figures 12 through 51. Figures 12, 13, 14 demonstrate the sphere as a symbol of motion to be emblematic of fire, water, and air, and the cube as a symbol of weight to the emblematic of earth. The sphere rests upon a point, the cube upon a surface. The sphere is therefore used to symbolize spirit, and the cube matter. Figure 14 demonstrates that atmosphere rushing in behind a falling object increases its velocity and apparently adds to its weight. The essential nature of each element is occultly signified by the peculiar symbol and character assigned to it. Of Figure 15, the symbol of salt, von Welling writes, in substance, the cube has 6 sides, corresponding to the 6 days of creation, with the point of rest, the 7th day, in the center of the cube. On each surface of the cube appear the signs of the 4 elements, triangles. The alchemists declared that salt was the first created substance produced by the fire, Shemayim, which flowed out of God. In salt, all creation is concentrated. In salt are the beginning and end of all things. The cube, furthermore, is composed of 12 bodies, each of which has 6 sides. These bodies are the 12 fundamental pillars of the true invisible church, and when these 12 bodies are multiplied by their 6 sides, the magical number 72 results. The wise have said that nothing is perfect until it has been dissolved, separated, and again united, so that it becomes a body composed of 12 bodies, like the cube. The cube also consists of 6 pyramids with the 6 surfaces of the cube as their bases. The points of these 6 pyramids meet at the center of the cube. These 6 pyramids, which consisting of 4 triangles, signify the elements and produce the magical number 24, which refers to the elders before the throne. The 6 surfaces and the point constitute the magical number 7. If 7 be multiplied by 7 again, and so on 7 times, the answer will reveal the method used by the ancients for measuring the periods of eternity. Thus, 1. 7 times 7 equals 49. 2. 49 times 7 equals 343. 3. 343 times 7 equals 2,401. 4. 2,401 times 7 equals 16,807. 5. 16,807 times 7 equals 117,649. 6. 117,649 times 7 equals 823,543. 7. 823,543 times 7 equals 5,764,801. This is not to be taken as earth years or times. The 5 million represents the great hall year, the 700,000, the great Sabbath year, wherein all human beings gradually gain true understanding and become heirs to their original and eternal inheritance, which was lost when they were enmeshed in the lower elements. The 64,800 is the number of the fallen angels, and the last 1 year signifies the liberation of Lucifer and return to his original state. Figure 16 is another symbol of salt, while Figure 17, the dot, is the sign of spirit, gold, the sun, or the germ of life. If the dot be moved before itself, it becomes a line, Figure 18. This motion of the dot is the first motion. The beginning and end of every line is a dot. Figure 19 is the circle. It is the second motion and the most perfect of all lines. Out of it are formed all figures and bodies imaginable. Figure 20 represents the outpouring of the upper and spiritual life into manifestation. Figure 21 represents darkness, for it is the loosening of the subterrene destructive principle. Figure 20 is also the symbol of day and Figure 21 of night. Figure 22 is a symbol of water. Figure 23 is the complete universal character of light and darkness. The upright triangle represents Shemayim, the inverted triangle, the dark earth, which imprisons the infernal subterranean fire. It is the first day of creation, or the time of the separation of Shemayim and Aries. Figure 24 represents the 6 days of creation and proves that the elements are an outflow of the divine fire, which, breaking up, becomes the substances of the tangible universe as signified in Figure 25. Figure 26 is the character of the air, showing that air is born out of the eternal light and the ethereal water. Figure 27 is the character of water. It is the inversion of Figure 26, indicating that its origin is from the lower fire and not the higher. Its upper part signifies that water does not lack the divine element, but as a universal mirror reflects the heavenly influences. Figures 28 and 29 are symbols of salt, showing that it is both fire and water in one. Figure 30 is the character of fire in all its attributes, and Figure M, the same inverted, water in all its powers. Figure 32 is the character of salt in all its attributes. Figure 33 represents both gold and the sun. Their essential natures are identical, being formed from the first fire out of Shemaim. They are perfect, as can be seen from their symbol, for no more perfect form can be produced out of the dot than the circle. Figure 34 is the character of the greater and lesser worlds, as the dot is surrounded by its circumference. This world is surrounded by Shemaim. Man, the little world, is included in this symbol because his inner nature is potential gold, Afar Min Hadama, which gold is his eternal indestructible spiritual body. Gold is the masculine principle of the universe. Figure 35 is the character of silver and the moon. It signifies that silver, like gold, is a perfect metal, except that the red part of its nature is turned inward. Silver is the feminine principle of the universe. Figure 36 is the character of copper and Venus. Figure 37 of iron and Mars. Figure 38 of tin and Jupiter. Figure 39 of lead and Saturn. Figure 40 of Mercury, both the planet and the element. Figure 41 of antimony, the key metal of the earth itself. Figure 42 of arsenic. Figure 43 of sulfur. Figure 44 of cinnabar. Figure 45 of quicklime. Figure 46 of nitre, and Figure 47 of vitriol. Figure 48 is the character of sal ammoniac, which element derives its name from the temple of Jupiter Ammon in an Egyptian desert where it was found. Figure 49 is the character of alum. Figure 50 of alkali, a name of Arabian origin, and Figure 51 of sal tartar, a substance possessing great occult virtue. Table 3, Figure 52. The 8 globes and the central square represent the 7 days of creation. The 3 worlds wherein creation occurs are symbolized by 3 concentric rings. The German words in the outer ring are extracts from the first chapter of Genesis. The words around the outside of the outer ring are the first day. The 4 small globes inside the outer ring deal with the abstract phases of creation. The upper globe containing the triangle encloses the words heaven and earth. The globe to the right contains the word light, and the one to the left, Jehovah Elohim, in the upper part and darkness in the lower part. The globe at the bottom contains the word day in the upper half and night in the lower. The 4 globes within the second ring depict the second, third, fourth, and fifth days of creation. The white globe above, divided by a dotted line, is designated the second day, the globe to the left with the mountains, the third day, the globe to the right with the planetary rings, the fourth day, and the globe below bisected by a dotted line, the fifth day. The square in the central ring containing the human form is marked the sixth day. This chart is diagrammatic exposition of the 3 layers of the macrocosmic and microcosmic auric eggs, showing the forces active within them. Table 4, Figure 53. Figure 53 has been designated the symbolic tomb of Christian Rosenkreuz. The upper circle is the first world, the divine sphere of God. The triangle in the center is the throne of God. The small circles at the points of the stars symbolize the 7 great spirits before the throne, mentioned in the book of Revelation, in the midst of which walks the Alpha and Omega, the Son of God. The central triangle contains 3 flames, the divine Trinity. From the lowest of these flames proceeds the first divine outflow, shown by 2 parallel lines descending through the throne of Saturn, the spirit, Oriphilis, through whom God manifested himself. Passing through the boundary of the celestial universe and the 22 spheres of the lower system, the lines end at point B, the throne of Lucifer, in whom the divine outpouring is concentrated and reflected. From him the divine light irradiates in succession to D, Capricorn, E, Gemini, F, Libra, G, Taurus, H, Pisces, I, Aquarius, K, Cancer, L. Virgo, M. Aries, N. Leo, O. Scorpio, P. Sagittarius, thence back to D. The zodiacal circles represent 12 orders of great and beneficent spirits, and the smaller circles within the ring of fixed stars mark the orbits of the sacred planets. Table 5. Figure 54. Figure 54 is similar to Figure 53, but represents the universe at the time God manifested himself through the character of Jupiter, the spirit Sachaciel. Von Welling gives no reason for the change in the order of influx into the 12 orders of spirits, for the third world, for the adding of another circle and the interlaced triangles in the upper world, or for the letters Y and Z. In the upper triangle, A represents the father principle, F the divine outflow, G the point of influx into the 12 orders of spirits, probably Sagittarius. The letters H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, S, and T denote the sequential points of irradiations to each other. W and X, the world of the sons of God, and B, C, D, and E, the world of Lucifer. This plate shows the universe after the descent of Lucifer into matter. According to von Welling, when Lucifer wanted to control power, the influx of the divine light instantly ceased. Lucifer's world, which later became the solar system, with all its legions of spirits, who in their essence were Shemaim, reflecting his ideas and inverting the divine light, was turned into darkness. Lucifer's Shemaim thereupon became a contracted disk, a tangible substance, and chaos came into existence. Table 6. Figures 55 through 59. Figure 55 symbolizes the chaos of Lucifer, Figure 56, the separation of light from darkness, Figure 57, the light in the midst of the darkness, and Figure 58, the regions of the elements and their inhabitants. The 4 A's signify the abyss surrounding all things. The AB is the fiery throne of Lucifer. The plane of G is the subterranean air, F, the subterranean water, C, the earth region, D, the outer water, E, the outer air, W and X, the region of Shemaim. The elemental inhabitants of the planes differ in goodness according to their proximity to the center of wickedness, A, B. The earth's surface, C, divides the subterranean elementals from those of the outer water, air, and fire, D, C, and X. The elementals of the upper strata, the upper half of C, and all of D, E, and X, represent an ascending scale of virtue, while those of the lower strata, the lower half of C, and all of F, G, and AB, represent a descending scale of depravity. The region of air, E, is a partial exception to this order. While air is close to the light and filled with beautiful spirits, it is also the habitation of Beelzebub, the evil spirit of the air, with his legion of elemental demons. Upon the subtle element of air are impressed the influences of the stars, the thoughts, words, and deeds of man, and a myriad of mysterious influences from the various planes of nature. Man inhales these impressions, and they produce diverse effects upon his mind. In air are suspended also the seed germs by which water is impregnated and made capable of bringing forth forms of organic and inorganic life. The grotesque figures seen in crystal caves and frost pictures upon windows are caused by these aerial impressions. While the air elementals are great and wise, they are treacherous and confused because amenable to both good and evil impressions. The mighty elemental beings who inhabit the watery light fire of the region X cannot be deceived by the spirits of darkness. They love the creatures of the waters, for the watery element, D, proceeded from the fiery water, X. Mortal man cannot endure the society of these fiery spirits, but gains wisdom from them through the creatures of the waters in which they continually mirror themselves. Figure 59 represents this solar system, with W and X as the locality of the Garden of Eden. Table 7. Figures 1 through 5, 7, 8. Table 8 has Figure 6. Figure 1 is the triune divine sulfur, the all-perfect out of the all-perfect, the soul of creatures. The threefold divine one is symbolized by 3 interlaced circles designated alchemically salt, sulfur, and mercury. In the central triangle is the divine name, Ehyeh. Geist means spirit. The other words require no translation. Figure 2 is common destructive sulfur. A bar placed in the triangle makes it the character of earth. Figure 3 is true oil of vitriol, composed of a circle with 2 diameters and 2 reversed half circles hanging below. In this are hidden the characters of all metals. Tin is symbolized by figure 4 and iron by figure 5. Figure 7 is the solar system according to Copernicus. Figure 8 is the Last Judgment. The sun is removed from the center of the solar system and replaced by the Earth. This changes the respective positions of all the other planets except Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, which retain their respective circles. The letter A signifies the circle of the sun, B, that of Mercury, C, that of Venus, D, that of the moon, and E, that of the earth. Inward from the sphere H are the great circles of damnation. Table 8, Figure 6. In Figure 6, the letter A marks the center of eternity. The motion of the rays toward B, D, and C was the first divine manifestation and is symbolized by the equilateral triangle B, D, C. The eternal world within the inner circle became manifest in the water, salt, the light, mercury, and the fire, sulfur, of the archetypal world, represented by the 3 circles F, E, G, within the triangle of complete equality, H, I, K, which is in turn surrounded by the circle of the high throne. The circle F is named understanding, E, wisdom, G, reason. In circle I is the word Father, in circle H, Son, in circle K, Spirit. The 7 outer circles are the 7 spirits before the throne. The lower part of the figure is similar to figures 53 and 54. The outer circles are the angelic world, ending in the cognizable world of the sons of God. Then comes the circle of the visible constellations and fixed stars. Within this is the solar system with the sun as the center, L. Ungurud means abyss. Table 9, Figure 9. Figure 9 is a synthesis of the Old and New Testaments and represents the interblending planes of being. In the right margin, the 7 outer circles contain the names of the planetary angels. The words in the graduated circles from the top triangle downward read 1. Abyss of compassion, 2. Zion, 3. The new heaven and the new earth, 4. The new Jerusalem, 5. Paradise, 6. The bosom of Abraham, 7. The outer courts of the Lord. From below, the circles of darkness reach upward, each divine principle being opposed by an infernal opposite. The small circle on the left containing a triangle and cross is named the Tree of Life, and that on the right, the Tree of Knowledge of Good and Evil. In the center of the diagram is the Trinity, joined with the superior and inferior planes by lines of activity. Table 10, Figures 10 through 15. Figure 10 shows the New Jerusalem in form of a cube, with the names of the 12 tribes of Israel written on the 12 lines of the cube. In the center is the Eye of God. The words round the outer circle are from the Book of Revelation. Figures 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15 possibly are cipher symbols of the angels of the plagues, the name of the Antichrist, the signature of the beast of Babylon, and the name of the woman riding on the beast of blasphemy. Table 11, Figures 1 through 11. Figure 1 is the solar system according to Genesis. The O on top of the radius of the circle is the dot of eternity, the beginning of beginnings. The whole diameter is the outflow of God, manifesting first in the heaven of heavens, the Shemaim, in which region human understanding cannot function. The space from K to I contains the heavens of Saturn, Jupiter, and Mars. L to M, the heavens of Venus and Mercury. M to H, the heavens of the Sun. The letter E is the moon, the circle of the earth. Figure 2 is the globe of the earth, showing the houses and signs of the zodiac. Figure 3 is the character of the universal Mercury, divine life, in its triune aspect of mercury, sulfur, and salt. Figure 4 is true saltpeter, purified with quicklime and alkali. Figure 5 shows the exact degree or angle of the planet's places, as well as the individual fixed stars in the zodiac. The letter A is the sun, and B is the earth. From K to I are the circles of Mercury and Venus, G to H, the circles of Earth and Moon, F to E and E to C, of Jupiter and Saturn, C to D, the starry belt or zodiac. Figure 6 is the microcosm with the planets and signs of the zodiac corresponding to the different parts of its form. The words upon the figure read, "Know thyself." In words, herbs, and stones lies a great power. Figure 7 is the universal character from which all characters have been taken. Figures 8, 9, and 10 are left to the solution of the reader. Figure 11 is the radiating universal Mercury. Table 12, figures 12 through 19. Figure 12 is called a mirror of astrological aspects. Below it is an astrologer's wheel. Figure 13 is similar to Figure 12. Figure 14 is a secret alchemical formula. The words around the circle read, "Out of one, in all is all." Figure 15 is an unsatisfactory attempt to show the comparative sizes of the suns and planets and their distances from each other. Figure 16 is the solar system with its internal and spiritual heavens. AB is the solar system. C is the sphere of fixed stars. D, E, F, G are the systems of the spiritual worlds. H is the throne of the living God. J, K, L, M, and N are the great beyond, unmeasurable. Figure 17 shows the creation of the solar system out of the ring of the divine eternity. The 4 A's are the abyss. B is the first revelation of God out of the abyss, and from this revelation, C, D, E, F, and G were created. C and D represent the spiritual hierarchies. D and E, the upper worlds or constellations. E and F, the distance from Jupiter to the upper worlds. F and G, the solar system with its planets and their heavens. B and C, the throne of Christ. Figure 18 describes the division according to Genesis of the waters above the heavens, D, from the waters below, A, B, and C. Figure 19 is the Mercury of the philosophers, essential to material existence. Table 13, figures 1 through 4. Figure 1 is Ein Sof, the incomprehensible abyss of divine majesty, an endless welling up, limitless in time and space. Figure 2 symbolizes the three divine principles, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. Around the triangle is written, I shall be that I shall be. At the apex of the triangle is the word crown. In the left point, wisdom. In the right point, understanding. Figure 3 represents the Trinity with its outflow. The words above the upper sphere are revelation of the divine majesty and Jehovah Elohim. The lower circles contain the names of the hierarchies controlling the lower worlds. The words within the circle of stars read, Lucifer, the son of the aurora of the morning. The letter C represents the universal Mercury. The words within the circle read, the first beginning of all creatures. Figure 4 represents the abode of Lucifer and his angels, the chaos spoken of in Genesis. Table 14, figures 5, 7, and 8. Figure 5 shows the triangle of triune divinity in the midst of a cross. At the left is a small triangle containing the words, the secrets of Elohim, and at the right is another inscribed, the secrets of nature. On the horizontal arms of the cross are the words, the tree of life, and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. The plate explains the interblending of the spiritual and infernal powers in the creation of the universe. Figure 7 is called the road to paradise. It probably indicates the positions of the sun, moon, and planets at the moment of their genesis. Figure 8 is the earth before the flood, when it was watered by a mist or vapor. The words at the left are the tree of life, those at the right the tree of knowledge of good and evil. The diagram with the symbol of Mars is devoted to a consideration of the rainbow. Table 15, figures 6, 9, and 10. Figure 6 is similar to Figure 5 and is called the secret of nature. An interesting diagram is shown on either side of the central figure, each consisting of a triangle with circles radiating from its points. The diagram on the left is called the secrets of the upper world, and the one on the right, the secrets of the underworld. Figure 9 is the solar system. Around the central part are the words, the place of the damned. Figure 10 shows the dot, or point of rest, surrounded by a triangle enclosing a circle containing the names of the 12 tribes of Israel. It represents completion of the process of regeneration and the consummation of the great work. Alchemy and its exponents. Is the transmutation of base metals into gold possible? Is the idea one at which the learned of the modern world can afford to scoff? Alchemy was more than a speculative art. It was also an operative art. Since the time of the immortal Hermes, alchemists have asserted, and not without substantiating evidence, that they could manufacture gold from tin, silver, lead, and mercury, that the galaxy of brilliant philosophic and scientific minds who, over a period of 2,000 years, affirmed the actuality of metallic transmutation and multiplication, could be completely sane and rational on all other problems of philosophy and science, yet hopelessly mistaken on this one point, is untenable. Nor is it reasonable that the hundreds declaring to have seen and performed transmutations of metals could all have been dupes, imbeciles, or liars. Those assuming that all alchemists were of unsound mentality would be forced to put in this category nearly all the philosophers and scientists of the ancient and medieval worlds. Emperors, princes, priests, and common townsfolk have witnessed the apparent miracle of metallic metamorphosis. In the face of existing testimony, anyone is privileged to remain unconvinced, but the scoffer elects to ignore evidence worthy of respectful consideration. Many great alchemists and hermetic philosophers occupy an honored niche in the Hall of Fame, while their multitudinous critics remain obscure. To list all these sincere seekers after nature's great arcanum is impossible, but a few will suffice to acquaint the reader with the superior types of intellect who interested themselves in this abstruse subject. Among the more prominent names are those of Thomas Norton, Isaac of Holland, Basil Valentine, the supposed discoverer of antimony, Jean de Meung, Roger Bacon, Albertus Magnus, Quadratenus Gerber, the Arabian who brought the knowledge of alchemy to Europe through his writings, Paracelsus, Nicholas Flamel, John Frederick Helvetius, Raymond Lully, Alexander Sepin, Michael Sendivogius, Count Bernard of Treviso, Sir George Ripley, Picus de Mirandola, John Dee, Henry Coenrath, Michael Mayer, Thomas Vaughan, J.B. von Helmont, John Hayden, Lascaris, Thomas Carnock, Synesius, Bishop of Ptolemais, Moreau, the Comte de Cagliostro, and the Comte de Saint-Germain. There are legends to the effect that King Solomon and Pythagoras were alchemists and that the former manufactured by alchemical means the gold used in his temple. Albert Pike takes side with the alchemical philosophers by declaring that the gold of the Hermetists was a reality. He says, "The Hermetic science, like all the real sciences, is mathematically demonstrable. Its results, even material, are as rigorous as that of a correct equation. The Hermetic gold is not only a true dogma, a light without shadow, a truth without alloy of falsehood. It is also a material gold, real, pure, the most precious that can be found in the mines of the earth. So much for the Masonic angle." Albertus Magnus, from Jovius's Vitae Illustrum Virorum. Albert de Groot was born about 1206 and died at the age of 74. It has been said of him that he was Magnus in Magia, Major in Philosophia, Maximus in Theologia. He was a member of the Dominican order and the mentor of St. Thomas Aquinas in alchemy and philosophy. Among other positions of dignity occupied by Albertus Magnus was that of Bishop Regensburg. He was beatified in 1622. Albertus was an Aristotelian philosopher, an astrologer, and a profound student of medicine and physics. During his youth he was considered of deficient mentality, but his since service and devotion were rewarded by a vision in which the Virgin Mary appeared to him and bestowed upon him great philosophical and intellectual powers. Having become master of the magical sciences, Albertus began the construction of a curious automaton, which he invested with the powers of speech and thought. The android, as it was called, was composed of metals and unknown substances chosen according to the stars and endued with spiritual qualities by magical formulae and invocations, and the labor upon it consumed over 30 years. St. Thomas Aquinas, thinking the device to be a diabolical mechanism, destroyed it, thus frustrating the labor of a lifetime. In spite of this act, Albertus Magnus left to St. Thomas Aquinas his alchemical formulae, including, according to legend, the secret of the philosopher's stone. On one occasion, Albertus Magnus invited William II, Count of Holland and King of the Romans, to a garden party in midwinter. The ground was covered with snow, but Albertus had prepared a sumptuous banquet in the open grounds of his monastery at Cologne. The guests were amazed at the imprudence of the philosopher, but as they sat down to eat, Albertus uttered a few words, the snow disappeared, the garden was filled with flowers and singing birds, and the air was warm with the breezes of summer. As soon as the feast was over, the snow returned, much to the amazement of the assembled nobles. For details, see the lives of alchemistical philosophers. William and Mary jointly ascended the throne of England in 1689, at which time alchemists must have abounded in the kingdom. For during the first year of their reign, they repealed an act made by King Henry IV, in which that sovereign declared the multiplying of metals to be a crime against the crown. In Dr. Sigismund Backstrom's collection of alchemical manuscripts is a handwritten copy of the act passed by William and Mary, copied from Chapter 30 of Statutes at Large for the first year of their reign. The act reads as follows: An act to repeal the statute made in the 5th year of King Henry IV, late King of England, wherein it was enacted, among other things, in these words, or to this effect, namely, that none from henceforth should use to multiply gold or silver, or use the craft of multiplication, and if any of the same do, they shall incur the pain of felony. And whereas, since the making of the said statute, divers persons have, by their study, industry, and learning, arrived to great skill and perfection in the art of melting and refining of metals, and otherwise improving and multiplying them and their ores, which very much abound in this realm, and extracting gold and silver, are of the same, but dare not to exercise their said skill within this realm, for fear of falling under the penalty of the said statute, but exercise the said art in foreign parts, to the great loss and detriment of this realm. Be it therefore enacted by the kings and queens most excellent majesties, by and with the advice and consent of the lords spiritual and temporal and commons in this present parliament assembled, that from henceforth the aforesaid branch, article, or sentence contained in the said act, and every word, matter, and thing contained in the said branch or sentence, shall be repealed, annulled, revoked, and forever made void. Anything in the said act, to the contrary, in any wise whatsoever, notwithstanding. Provided always, and be it enacted by the authority aforesaid, that all the gold and silver that shall be extracted by the aforesaid art of melting or refining of metals, and otherwise improving and multiplying of them and their ores, as before set forth, be from henceforth employed for no other use or uses whatsoever, but for the increase of monies, and that the place hereby appointed for the disposal thereof shall be their Majesties' Mint, within the Tower of London, at which place they are to receive the full and true value of their gold and silver, so procured from time to time, according to the assay and fineness thereof, and so for any greater or less weight, and that none of that metal of gold and silver so refined and procured be permitted to be used or disposed of in any other place or places within their Majesties' dominions. After this repealing measure had become effective, William and Mary encouraged the further study of alchemy. Dr. Franz Hartmann has collected reliable evidence concerning 4 different alchemists who transmuted base metals into gold, not once but many times. One of these accounts concerns a monk of the order of St. Augustine named Wenzel Seeler, who discovered a small amount of mysterious red powder in his convent. In the presence of Emperor Leopold I, King of Germany, Hungary, and Bohemia, he transmuted quantities of tin into gold. Among other things which he dipped into his mysterious essence was a large silver metal. That part of the metal which came in contact with the gold-producing substance was transmuted into the purest quality of the more precious metal. The rest remained silver. With regard to this metal, Dr. Hartmann writes, "The most indisputable proof, if appearances can prove anything, of the possibility of transmuting base metals into gold may be seen by everyone who visits Vienna, it being a metal preserved in the imperial treasury chamber, and it is stated that this metal, consisting originally of silver, has been partly transformed into gold by alchemical means by the same Wenzel Seeler, who was afterwards made a knight by the Emperor Leopold I and given the title Wenceslaus Ritter von Rheinberg in the pronaos of the Temple of Wisdom." Space limitations preclude a lengthy discussion of the alchemists. A brief sketch of the lives of 4 should serve to show the general principles on which they worked, the method by which they obtained their knowledge, and the use which they made of it. These 4 were grand masters of this secret science, and the stories of their wanderings and strivings, as recorded by their own pens and contemporaneous disciples of the Hermetic art, are as fascinating as any romance of fiction. Paracelsus of Hohenheim. The most famous of alchemical and hermetic philosophers was Philippus Aureolus Theophrastus Bombastus von Hohenheim. This man, who called himself Paracelsus, declared that someday all the doctors of Europe would turn from the other schools and, following him, revere him above every other physician. The accepted date of the birth of Paracelsus is December 17, 1493. He was an only child. Both his father and mother were interested in medicine and chemistry. His father was a physician and his mother the superintendent of a hospital. While still a youth, Paracelsus became greatly interested in the writings of Isaac of Holland and determined to reform the medical science of his day. When 20 years old, he began a series of travels which continued for about 12 years. He visited many European countries, including Russia. It is possible that he penetrated into Asia. It was in Constantinople that the great secret of the Hermetic arts was bestowed upon him by Arabian adepts. His knowledge of the nature spirits and the inhabitants of the invisible worlds he probably secured from the Brahmins of India, with whom he came in contact either directly or through their disciples. He became an army physician, and his understanding and skill brought him great success. Upon his return to Germany, he began his long-dreamed-of reformation of the medical arts and sciences. He was opposed on every hand and criticized unmercifully. His violent temper and tremendously strong personality undoubtedly precipitated many storms upon his head, which might have been avoided had he been of a less caustic disposition. He flayed the apothecaries, asserting that they did not use the proper ingredients in their prescriptions and did not consider the needs of their patients, desiring only to collect exorbitant fees for their concoctions. The remarkable cures which Paracelsus effected only made his enemies hate him more bitterly, for they could not duplicate the apparent miracles which he wrought. He not only treated the more common diseases of his day, but is said to have actually cured leprosy, cholera, and cancer. His friends claimed for him that he all but raised the dead. His systems of healing were so heterodox, however, that slowly but surely his enemies overwhelmed him again and again, forced him to leave the fields of his labors and seek refuge where he was not known. Paracelsus, from the complete writings of Paracelsus of Hohenheim. In his Biographia Antiqua, Francis Barrett appends to the name of Paracelsus the following titles of distinction: the Prince of Physicians and Philosophers by Fire, Grand Paradoxical Physician, the Trismegistus of Switzerland, First Reformer of Chemical Philosophy, Adept in Alchemy, Kabbalah, and Magic, Nature's Faithful Secretary, Master of the Elixir of Life and the Philosopher's Stone, and the Great Monarch of Chemical Secrets. There is much controversy concerning the personality of Paracelsus. That he had an irascible disposition, there is no doubt. His disposition towards physicians and for women amounted to a mania. For them he had nothing but abuse. As far as can be learned, there was never a love affair in his life. His peculiar appearance and immoderate system of living were always held against him by his adversaries. It is believed that his physical abnormalities may have been responsible for much of the bitterness against society which he carried with him throughout all his intolerant and tempestuous life. His reputed intemperance brought upon him still more persecution, for it was asserted that even during the time of his professorship in the University of Basel, he was seldom sober. Such an accusation is difficult to understand in view of the marvelous mental clarity for which he was noted at all times. The vast amount of writing which he accomplished, the Strasbourg edition of his collected works is in 3 large volumes, each containing several hundred pages, is a monumental contradiction of the tales regarding his excessive use of alcoholics. No doubt many of the vices of which he is accused were sheer inventions by his enemies, who, not satisfied with hiring assassins to murder him, sought to besmirch his memory after they had revengefully ended his life. The manner in which Paracelsus met his death is uncertain, but the most credible account is that he died as the indirect result of a scuffle with a number of assassins who had been hired by some of his professional enemies to make away with the one who had exposed their chicanery. Few manuscripts are extant in the handwriting of Paracelsus, for he dictated the majority of his works to his disciples who wrote them down. Professor John Maxon Stillman of Stanford University pays the following tribute to his memory. Whatever be the final judgment as to the relative importance of Paracelsus in the upbuilding of medical science and practice, it must be recognized that he entered upon his career at Basel with the zeal and the self-assurance of one who believed himself inspired with a great truth and destined to take effect a great advance in the science and practice of medicine. By nature, he was a keen and open-minded observer of whatever came under his observation, though probably also not a very critical analyst of the observed phenomena. He was evidently an unusually self-reliant and independent thinker, though the degree of originality in his thought may be a matter of legitimate differences of opinion. Certainly, once having, from whatever combination of influences, made up his mind to reject the sacredness of the authority of Aristotle, Galen, and Avicenna, and having found what to his mind was a satisfactory substitute for the ancient dogmas in his own modification of the Neoplatonic philosophy, he did not hesitate to burn his ships behind him. Having cut loose from the dominant Galenism of his time, he determined to preach and teach that the basics of the medical science of the future should be the study of nature, observation of the patient, experiment and experience,